Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the October 5th, 2016 meeting of the Sherborn Board of Selectmen. Mark Brandon will be participating remotely because of unavoidable travel in accordance with the Town of Sherborn Board of Selectmen policy on remote participation. Mark, are you on the line and can you hear us?
I am, yes.
Okay, very good. All votes will be taken by roll call vote. Anyone interested in speaking or providing comment must be recognized by the meeting chair before speaking. Once recognized, all speakers must come to the front of the room to be near the phone equipment, regardless of how brief the comment may be. Before offering comments, the speaker must identify themselves by first and last name every time they are recognized, and additionally should provide their home address the first time they are recognized. If a communication problem is encountered, we will take a brief break and try to resolve the issue. If the line disconnects, the remote participant is responsible for trying to reestablish the connection by dialing back into the phone system. If the problem cannot be resolved in a few minutes or continues to occur, the use of the equipment will be stopped. Background noise, conversation, and speaking without being recognized should be kept to a minimum, and we ask that all attendees remain quiet throughout the meeting unless recognized to speak. So having disposed of the technical information there, we can ask our town administrator to please read through our relatively short agenda today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, we'll vote to approve or amend the agenda and add topics not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance. I'm not aware of any of those items. And then consideration of one-day liquor license for October 8th, 2016. Then consideration of positions on fall special town meeting warrant articles. And then consideration of special town meeting warrant for a solar project article. And then 7 o'clock meeting in conjunction with advisory hearing regarding fall special town meeting scheduled for October 24th, 2016.
Okay, very good. Good. So the first item is the one-day liquor license, and I see Jean is here. Was everything in order, Jean, on this license application? Okay, this would be a one-day liquor license for October 8th, 2016, between the hours of 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. Do we have a motion to approve this?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? And that was moved by Paul and seconded by Chuck. Mark, any discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll have to take a roll call vote. Mr. Durensis?
Votes aye.
Mr. Yan?
Aye.
Mr. Brandon?
Yes.
And I will vote yes also. So vote of 4-0. We've approved the license. And do we have a? Yeah, we do. We have the form here. So I will sign it and pass it down the row. And David, we're going to get on an upcoming agenda, a discussion with Town Council about how to improve our process for these one-day licenses. I know there's been some recommendations that we heard about earlier.
Yes.
Okay, good. Second item on the agenda is consideration of the fall special town meeting warrant articles. So there are 4 articles on the approved warrant, and we have copies of those here.
There's a document in your packet that includes the motions.
Yes.
That's the advisory report with the draft motions. They have a right to change those motions.
Right, sure. Okay.
Do you want that? You want me to read the articles?
Let's just go through the articles one at a time. The first article is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money, and if so, what sum for unpaid bills, or take any other action relative thereto. And there are 3 payments listed for a total amount of $5,679.34. These are evidently bills that came in from after the last town meeting and for work that was not in this fiscal year.
Move approval.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to
Support.
and a second on that. A motion by Mr. Durensis, second by Mr. Yan. Any further discussion of this one? It's pretty routine.
Yeah, Mark, I don't know if you had a chance to look at the materials. These are unchanged from the last meeting where we looked at these bills.
Yes. I got no further to say.
Great.
This is going to take a 9/10 vote to pass,
Is that right?
so, because it's an unpaid bill from prior years at a special town meeting. So there better not be any questions at this late time.
Okay. All right, and everything's in order here, David? You've worked with the treasurer or with who on this?
Yes, this is with accounting office.
Okay, great, good. Okay, so moved and seconded, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Durensis?
Aye.
Mr. Yan?
Aye.
Mr. Brandon?
yes,
And I am yes also. So we've voted to support this by a vote of 4-0. Okay, Article 2, to see if the town will vote to allow the fire chief or fire chief's designee to require third-party review and related services for fire protection and fire-related code matters, and for the reviews to be paid by the applicant or take any other action relative thereto. And it would amend the general bylaws by adding a Section 15 to Chapter 3. The text of Section 15 is set out here. I'm not going to read that unless somebody feels I need to read it.
I move that the Board of Selectmen support the proposed favorable action on Article 3.
Okay,
Second?
Or Article 2.
Article 2, moved by Mr. Durensis, second by Mr. Yan. Any discussion? Mark, you okay with
I'm good, yes,
Okay, great. So let's take a vote. Mr. Durensis?
Yes.
Mr. Yan?
Aye.
Mr. Brandon?
yes,
And I'll be yes also, so that 4-0, the Board of Selectmen support this article. Now come the slightly more interesting ones. Article 3 is a citizen's petition, and the article description is to see if the town will vote pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 2, to increase the number of members of the Board of Health from 3 to 5 or take any action relative thereto. And the motion has been, rather than being under Chapter 41, Section 2, the motion actually is to petition the legislature for a special act increasing the size of the Board of Health from 3 to 5. And I believe the reason that is being suggested to do it that way is because this would allow the 2 new members to be elected at the first election rather than having to wait until existing terms expire. Am I right about that? That was my understanding. Okay. All right, so do we have any discussion of this article?
Well, I would rather hold on this for the time being for a couple of reasons. First, I'd like to hear what everybody has to say at the advisory hearing. The second is that I know the Board of Health is meeting tonight. I would want to see what the Board of Health has come up with
Okay.
in terms of position on these, given the fact that they're a sister board, they're elected by the voters of the town. They should be given the respect of at least taking a position and coming in here and telling us what they've decided to do on this thing.
Okay.
I don't disagree with the timing. I obviously spent 2 years on the governance task force, and the rationale for expanding boards from 3 to 5, I think, is compelling. So I will be strongly supporting it, but I agree with you, Paul, that we should certainly wait to hear what the Board of Health has to say. I'd note that for the expansion of the Board of Selectmen from 3 to 5, while the Governance Task Force Committee sought the views of the Board of Selectmen, as I recall, it was a 1-1-1 vote.
Yes, exactly. That's right.
So I don't think that this has to do with town governance, so we certainly should be respectful and get their opinion, but I think the rationales for expanding this board have been fully met, and have been very pleased with the work of the board this year, so I will be supporting this strongly.
Okay. If we're going to defer these articles, I'm going to talk really slowly the rest of the meeting because we have to get to 7 o'clock. I guess my views are aligned more with Chuck's in terms of I'm fine with waiting in giving both advisory and the proponents and any opponents of this bill time to be heard, this article time to be heard, but my inclination is to favor this article and support the idea of increasing the Board of Health
Which
from
is a
3
shift
to
from
5.
shift from your prior position based on your experience this year. correct?
I don't know if it's a shift on this one. I don't know if I've taken a position on Board of Health yet.
No, it's the general concept of a three-member versus a five-member board.
I think
so-
it's all context.
Yep.
Mark, do you have anything you want to say?
I also support this article, and one reason I called in was to be able to vote for it. I don't want to put the advisors in the burden of having a so many participants. So, I guess we've got, sounds like we've got 3, 4, and I can't tell where we're falls on this. I'd be happy to sign off on you guys take care of it.
We can certainly register you as being in support when advisory calls for our views, Mark. And by that point, we would presumably have taken some kind of a vote, and we would let we would let them know it was you plus however many other in favor of it.
Yeah, if I could lodge my vote now, that would be great.
I'm okay with him doing that. Are you guys okay with that
Yeah, I'm fine with
procedure?
that.
I think, whether it's not a vote in the sense that we're not really passing anything anyway. So, to reflect you accurately as being in favor, I think is fine.
Okay, great.
Note there's a typo, the very end, we need a closed parens on the act increasing the number to 5 members, period, close quotes.
Oh.
Because I think, in fact, for the legislative, for the special act, you have to have it in parentheses. You have to have a title for it.
So that's really more of a
That's a typo.
ministerial kind of
Absolutely.
That
change.
was just what came in on the petition, so that's why I left it.
Okay.
No, it's usually the whole thing.
Oh, this is a quote for the entire thing, Chuck. That's
Ends on the next
good.
page.
We didn't read onto the next page.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. The next article for discussion, and maybe we'll end up in the same position with this one as we did the last time, but Article 4 would establish qualifications to serve on the Sherborn Board of Health. It is in the best interest of the town of the Board of Health that the Health Board, this is the citizens petition, be experienced, credentialed health professionals or environmental scientists so they are equipped to interpret scientific data and analysis and can fulfill the charge of every health board pursuant to Mass General laws, which is to make decisions which will be in the interest of the public health for the benefit of Sherborn residents, Sherborn's natural resources, and the community as a whole. And the proposal is to establish minimum credentials for serving members of Sherborn's Board of Health, to effectively execute their mandate, this mandate to promote public health. And so this would also be a petition for a special act establishing qualifications. The qualifications are not actually set forth in the article itself, and there seem to be some other details that are not set forth in this article. So I guess it's a sort of a concept article at this point.
Well, they're adding more details to the article in their motion.
Was there a motion? The advisory board is doing that?
No, it's being requested by the proponents.
Well, so what will advisory and we be voting on tonight?
As far as I know, that the motion would be as it's being presented by the proponents,
Okay.
which is the additional language.
Yes, that's what you requested.
So do we have the additional language?
Yes.
It was posted to yourself, David, and to the others that you asked me to post it to.
I think it's the language beginning an act establishing.
It's not the one that was in the packet yesterday.
It's-
Okay, so you sent this around to us and printed it out for us?
No, I'm just catching up. That's,
All
When did we get this?
this came in midday today.
Oh, well, that's why none of us have seen it.
Yeah.
Can we make copies and
Yeah,
make it available
and I have it on the
to the
board.
whole board? Oh, it's up here.
That's a short vote.
What does that mean, the short form?
Why
It
do you,
doesn't contain the material that was requested by David on the advice of the town council. That additional information was provided today, in fact, the meeting tonight. We weren't given the exact time in which to deliver it.
Which additional, you mean the presentation?
Yeah, you asked for specific information on how this process would work, whether it be an appeal process. In the event you have the information that we had forwarded to you today.
I think that was council was asking for those.
I know the council had received it because they responded that they had.
Okay.
We just got this today. I
So
got an
did we.
email at 2:30 this afternoon with this.
Yeah, you got a little sooner to the head name, so.
Yes, so the motion we're reading tonight is what was in the warrant that you guys approved.
Okay.
Because that's what was posted.
So they'll, this would be the speculative motion that they
Would have to
would
bring up at
amend
town.
your motion at town meeting?
That's how I understand it would work, because the motion we're voting on tonight is what's in the warrant.
Right. Okay. I mean, we could still talk about this, I guess, if people want to talk about this. Paul, anybody up here have anything to say since?
Well, I'd say the same thing I said before, that on this, I want to hear more from the petitioners about the language that they have, which I haven't even seen, and hear from the Board of Health as to whether they are requesting this or not, things like that.
They do have a planned presentation to deliver at the advisory meeting.
The Board of Health?
No, I'm sorry. The proponents of the article.
Yeah, so let's listen. I just think it's basic fairness to
I have the
listen.
presentation if you want to walk through it. But
I'm sorry?
I have the presentation that Ms. Lombard sent me. But,
What would she have to do with it? She's on Article 3.
okay, then I'm confused.
We're talking Article 4 here.
I'm sorry.
We're not talking
So
support.
Chuck or Mark, do you have anything at this point that you want to say? And Mark, do you want to weigh in on this one also?
Yes, I would. I'm not fundamentally opposed to this one. I think it's a bad idea to put qualifications on elected positions. We have people who don't have the kind of qualifications I think different or to put forward who've done a good job in the Board of Health. And that's potential people who made some board decisions. So I'm very interested.
Okay. Anybody else want to say anything now?
I share that view. The rationale part of the rationale for a 5-member Board of Selectmen is to have a variety of views. And this, to me, seems, I just think it's fundamentally bad policy. The idea that somebody who's a farmer in town that doesn't have one of these degrees isn't qualified to be a steward of the land and water resources, to me, is just a fundamentally flawed argument. The idea that somebody would have to have these qualifications, I think, is fundamentally undemocratic, and we don't have these requirements for being a member of the Board of Selectmen. As somebody who is very anti-development without any of these qualifications, I think can represent a perspective on the Board of Health. Somebody who's pro-development who doesn't have these qualifications should be entitled to be on the Board of Health. So I share Mark's view that this is fundamentally bad policy. I don't support it in any way, in any form.
Oh, does that mean you're against it?
That does.
Okay.
Even though I don't have any of these degrees that are required to have an opinion.
Let's be sure I understood you. You're opposed to this
Yeah.
article?
Yeah, and I mean, I think my views are closer to Chuck's and Mark's also, but I'm going to see what the presentation has to say. But I think this is a dangerous precedent to set for any board in town. I think it does have, it does undermine the idea that this is a democracy and that people are entitled to vote for people as unqualified or qualified as they may be, and as dangerous or not dangerous as they may be to the public good.
Are you making a comment on a pending election?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Well, you know, the other concern it's not a concern, but the other point I would make about this is that the job that the folks on the Board of Health are supposed to do is done with staff support and with a well-functioning, experienced and trained health agent or other supporting staff or consulting help at, as called for, I think anyone who doesn't have the kinds of experiences or credentials still has the ability and can resort to the necessary information that they would need to make a decision one way or another. So I would be reluctant to meddle in the makeup of the board in the way that this article suggests. And I also think, just looking at the language up there, there's probably some technical problems with what's being proposed also.
Do you entertain any input from the proponents here?
Yeah, you can. And we're not going to take a vote now either, George, but yeah, we'd be happy to hear you, sure.
Okay. I understand where you're coming from on this. Our position on this is that we are at a point in time in the town's experience with environmental issues where we actually find ourselves with 3 people on the Board of Health who actually have the kind of credentials the state has actually supported for people being on the Board of Health. There's nothing in the listing of credentials that we provided that the state would find an issue with as being people qualified to serve on the Board of Health. We as a town, by DEP standard and reckoning, are among a handful of towns in this Commonwealth that have a set of environmental conditions that are unusual in that, and primarily, we do not supply in any respect town water or town sewerage. We are a minority group of towns that have this set of conditions. And inasmuch as we have standards in place to address these are standards which are in many cases more stringent than might be found in other communities that don't have these issues. In addition to that, at this time, we find ourselves pretty much alone in this district or this area of the state. The target of people who are looking to develop high-intensity development here. Now, in towns where you actually have public sewerage and public water, this is less of an issue than it is for us because we have not really had a history of high-impact, high-density development in this town. Because we now face this, we need to be particularly diligent about how we're going to address potential impact to our soil and water by these kinds of developments. As an illustration of what the Board of Health has done in this last year, the approval granted to Trask in particular for the project down on Lower Washington Street was accompanied by a 27-page set of conditions, which were largely the input of the Board of Health, of the 3-member Board of Health, I should point out, which did a very thorough and competent and professional job of addressing the issues so that we could present a case to the state as to why, if this project were built under state standards, it would impact adversely the environment, particularly the abutters and the groundwater surrounding the project. And as a consequence, we now have before the state a statement based upon our more stringent standards as they apply to this town, not to any other town, our businesses to know full well how these standards would help us maintain our quality of water and soil. When the state does review this, it may well be that they will find, as they did with the town of Stowe, that built to state standards, this project would indeed adversely affect the abutters of the development, adversely affect the soil and water conditions in the immediate area. And as a consequence, the state did find for the town of Stowe, recognize that their standards that they had in place actually would protect the environment if the project were built to their standards. And I would say the Board of Health has done a very good job with the 3 people they have to place before the state a case which is something that is in fact done to the standard that a state can appreciate for defense of our soil and water against development that is in fact quite different from what we've been experiencing before, in which we can make a case to say, okay, this level of development can be a problem for us, and here is why we think this is so. So we have before us now these issues that we need to actually
have, and it would be to the greater benefit of Sherborn citizens, to have a board constituted as it is presently, with people who actually have the kinds of professional experience that allow them to make an informed, knowledgeable assessment of what is brought before the town now by developers and by the need to protect the particular soils and waters that we don't have the means that other towns do to otherwise protect. These set of conditions are unusual, and they pertain to, as I said earlier, to a limited number of towns in this state, and we are one of them. In the 84-town district served by the DEP in this area, we are one of 3 that they've identified, Carlisle and Boxford being the others, that actually do not have the advantage that other towns do in being able to effectively meet the challenges posed by high-density developments. So we are aware that the state has had a history of recommending 3-member boards of health for this purpose, and beyond that, recommending a range of disciplines that they believe, or the state believes, work in the public interest. There's nothing wrong with having more knowledge to bring to bear than less knowledge to bring to bear. We want to have the best minds possible that we can muster within this town to address these issues. We are fortunate for the first time in many years to have 3 people on the Board of Health who actually all together have a common focus because of their common backgrounds and being able not only to appreciate the standards that we have now, but to understand the law and the science that support these standards. Now, it's important that people on serving on the Board of Health do appreciate these standards with the intent that, okay, we're going to maintain these standards unless and until it can be shown by those opposing these standards that either the law is failing under these standards or the science underpinning these standards is failing. If you're going to judge the standards fairly for anybody's agenda, you need to look at why we have these standards and what are the elements supporting these standards. The people, in our estimation, behind this petition who can best make that kind of judgment are people who actually have grounding, professional grounding, in fields of science and in law that would allow them to actually make the most informed decision, as opposed to people coming to the floor on the board who would not have this kind of background. If it were not for the fact that we have the particular set of conditions we have in Sherborn, if it were not for the fact that we are very much a minority community in this state as far as the conditions that we face in this time, it could reasonably be said that, yeah, perhaps as with the 95% or more of the other towns in the state, we would not need the protections that they do. But we are, in fact, a minority community in this respect, and we do need, for the greater benefit of all Sherborn citizens, not any particular agenda, but for everybody in this town, to ensure that our standards retain in place, are not compromised, and if there is objection to them and an expressed interest is made to change them, that expressed interest must show that either the law is invalid or the science behind these standards is invalid. To use any other criteria would be to undermine the status of these statutes and standards that we have now. We have had the occasion in the past where, yes, people on the board have not had these standards, had these kinds of credentials, and it has led to a certain amount of decision-making that clearly has been for the benefit of certain agendas, but not necessarily public health. The business of the Board of Health is public health. First and foremost, before anything else, it's public health. And we have a common focus now with the people on the board now, which has worked. It would not have worked anywhere near as well if we'd had divergent agendas and less experience on the board when we address the business of the approval of the ZBA project. So in these times and conditions, I can say from the personal experience of having done the canvassing for this petition, and we did garner over a Labor Day weekend, in a very short period of time, 155 signatures, of which 53 are ones I brought in. And I can say from actually speaking to people out there that there was a majority of these people, in fact most of them, were quite surprised that we're even mounting this petition because they thought, why aren't there criteria, aren't there standards in place, aren't there credentials required for people to be on the Board of Health? And no, they're quite amazed to find that there were not. So we have every reason to believe, based upon our experience thus far, that there is a preponderance of voters in this town that would approve of having standards for the Board of Health. We look at this basically as no different from what you would find in, say, a presidential election. There are standards for qualifying to be president. There are only 2 at this point, but whether it's 1 or 100 standards, standards do not preclude people being elected to office. There are certain qualifications that are desirable for many offices. And in our case, we are under the spotlight here. And it shows that very clearly. We need to have people in place who are best qualified to actually address the particular needs this town has. As to what sort of variations might occur within the credentialing of potential candidates whose credentials do not line up with the ones we've suggested, I submit that the Board of Health has already engaged in this sort of activity when it actually addresses the need for variances for specific septic systems. I've been in this town for 37 years, and there are people in this town who've been around longer than that, long enough to actually experience what it requires to actually get a septic system replaced. And it's true. Depending upon what the site will allow, what soil, water, and rock conditions will allow, variances will, in fact, vary according to the extent to which they're allowed to exceed state standards up to and including the town standards. You might have a location across the street that has one particular variance granted that requires things that may not be required of a situation just across the street on the other side. We know from experience that the town residents value this flexibility on the part of the Board of Health. The town has a vested interest in maintaining its existing properties intact, so long as they don't fall below the mandate of the state standard. We hold to a higher standard, and it's our intention whenever the need arises to upgrade a septic system, to upgrade it as closely as we can, as closely as the conditions of the site will allow, to the present Sherborn standard. Unlike new construction, which is not actually replacing anything, but which is starting from scratch, and for which we have a high standard that we mandate that new construction meet. That this disparity exists between new construction and existing construction has not been an issue for the Board of Health's actions in the past, and it should not necessarily be one going forward. It is a necessary part of how we actually deal in this town. We have, on the one hand, a need to retain our properties in existence. We also have a need to ensure that anything new that's coming in, and what's new coming in, is going to be, on the horizon at least, very high density development like we haven't seen before. And so it's necessary under these conditions that we maintain the standards that we have for new construction. Our rationale behind this from the beginning has been that the most qualified people are best qualified to deal with this. The notion that just anybody is qualified to actually pass on these particular situations may be good for other towns, but we believe not so for our town with its special situation.
Okay. People have any questions for George at this point? I had a couple of questions.
Yes.
So why can't the public elect somebody with any of these credentials if they think they're the most qualified for the position? Why is it necessary for the town to specify that only these credentials can even be a candidate?
These credentials we offer as a core group of credentials. We know that the state supports these credentials for people being on the Board of Health. These are reasonable credentials. These are known credentials.
That wasn't my question about what the credentials are. My question was, when the town goes to elect somebody to
Yes.
the Board of Health,
Yep.
and if someone with one of these credentials was running against someone who didn't have one of these credentials, why can't it be left to the town to decide what credentials they want to have on their Board of Health?
Because this is really like saying, okay, anyone can vote for anybody for president on whatever credentials they want to present.
They can.
They can.
Well, no, you are limited by age and you're limited by place of birth. Those are qualifications. They are
Right,
minimum.
right now, I think people for the Board of Health are also limited by age. They've got to be at least eligible to vote, and they've got to live in Sherborn. So we've got the exact same qualification. That's not a great argument.
No, but these are qualifications that are present for actually running for office. They don't preclude anybody, just because they're qualifications does not mean that they cannot be applied to an elected position.
Is there a reason that a registered sanitarian wouldn't be,
Oh,
a registered sanitarian would not be able to be on the Board of Health?
the credentials that we've offered are fairly broad, whether it's credentials in environmental science, which might include that easily enough. The credentials are really quite open. It's unless you actually bring to the table an agenda which clearly is not a health agenda, but rather an agenda for some other purpose. It's not hard to believe that people will vote for a person who actually has proper credentials. For the last 2 election cycles, that's what's happened in the Board of Health. The candidate who actually presented credentials in health science or health law has prevailed over those who did not. And we have every reason to believe, based upon the experience we've had with raising this petition, that the town will continue to vote that way. We're asking that, okay, the town now establish what we already know to be state-approved credentials for serving on the Board of Health. Right now they're recommended by the state, they're not required by the state. Although in certain cases, in the case where you have at least one Board of Health member being required to have one of these things, you have at least a guidepost for the others. If it were not for the fact that we didn't have the special conditions that we're facing right now, both for the condition we've had for like practically since the town was founded, as well as this new condition of new development coming in, it would not necessarily be the case that credentials would loom as large as they do. But we are going by the experience of the last year or two with the credentialing of the 3 present members, which has worked out. I don't think anyone can deny that having these 3 people with the credentials on the board that we have has not been a good thing in the larger public interest of this town. And that being the case, and based on the demonstrated conduct of this board, particularly in its assistance to the ZBA in developing a set of conditions, it was very necessary to present to the state, this is our case, for why concentrated development, at least in this area on Washington Street, would be injurious to the environment, is a good indication of how the expertise of this particular board, so credentialed as it is, can in fact deliver a case that would not otherwise have been as successful as would have been the case for people with less ability, less credentialing, less experience in these things.
Is there a reason the Board of Health, that reminds me of like a sorority or a fraternity, the Board of Health decides who the new Board of Health members can be? Is there a reason that that's set up that way?
We were asked to deliver an answer to how this process would work if people without these credentials that we specified would apply for a position to run for the Board of Health. What would happen if, in fact, you had a candidate who came to the table who did not actually have these credentials? It's a bit of a stretch to think that, okay, people would come to the table without these credentials, but it could happen. So what would we do? We try to keep the door open as much as we can. It's like a law firm entertaining a person with a law degree to determine whether that person's law degree actually works in line with the law practice as it exists with the larger group. Is your particular discipline going to be one that is congruent with what we do in this particular firm in law? It may well be. It may be sort of partially congruent, but that is a decision that the firm itself must within itself make. And it's for the greater good of the firm, just as vetting credentials for people who do not come to the table with this particular set of credentials is certainly a fair way of approaching it. The opening that we've given them is to show how what you bring to the table is going to enhance the Board of Health's ability to carry on its mission as it is doing. There's always the question of, well, I'm coming to the table here because I don't like the standards as they exist. And I'll tell you up front, my interest is in fact reducing these standards. Okay, tell us how you would address the twin supporting elements of these standards, the law and the science. How would you find that either of these is sufficiently invalid not to continue to support the standards we have? That is certainly fair, because that is what the Board of Health's business is. It's certainly okay to challenge these, but if you're going to challenge these standards, and if you're going to bring to the table credentials rooted in a challenge to these, it's only fair to the Sherborn larger public to be able to say, this standard is invalid legally for this reason, this standard is invalid for this reason scientifically. So far, we've not had those kinds of problems. The standards as they exist have not been challenged on the basis of their legality. They've not been challenged on the basis of their scientific worth. They're challenged for other reasons, which is pretty much still the reason why people feel that people with these other reasons should be allowed to have a voice on the Board of Health. In the past, when this has happened, it's been difficult for the Board of Health to have a consensus on what they're doing. It's difficult for the Board of Health to be called upon to advance an agenda which is not necessarily an agenda related to public health per se. Do people who actually want to be on the Board of Health for purposes other than the advancement of strictly Board of Health deserve a place on the board? If in fact they can work on the same basis that the Board of Health does in supporting or giving valid reason why the basis for the standards that are presently in effect would not be valid. We ask that people with credentials in law and science be on the board for this very reason. It doesn't mean that people with these credentials are forever going to uphold the standards that we have, but if they're challenged, they need to be challenged with a background in law or a background in science that pertains to public health.
Chuck, you had some questions?
Yeah, several comments. One, the statement that you have to be qualified in law or science is much broader than what we have here. These are specific, narrow, it's environmental science. If I've got a PhD in biochemistry, I don't think that I qualify.
Yeah, you would. That's why I'm saying you need to look at the...
Excuse me,
okay.
please. We listened for about 10 or 15 minutes without interrupting you, so please provide the same courtesy to us. I would note I have a degree in a legal degree. It's not in health law or environmental law. It's in pharmaceutical biotechnology. And the Board of Health, the ZBA, the Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, all dealt with a lot of 40B issues this year. The general chemical issue was dealt with by this board, none of whom have any of the degrees that would be a prerequisite to be on the Board of Health. Understandably, the Board of Health had a lot of things on its plate, but this year, a matter of a very serious public health issue, the general chemical plant, was handled by this board, none of whom have these credentials. Mm-hmm. We went out and hired the expertise that we needed, and since Mark is not here to defer to himself, I don't think Mark has any of these degrees. I think he has an MBA. He and I worked with the hired the experts to deal with the very technical, complex issues that the general chemical site raised. So I think within the last year we have an example of a very serious public health issue that was dealt with by a board with 5 people, none of whom have any of these qualifications. So I think fundamentally the idea that you are required, that the voters aren't allowed to elect whomever they choose because of preset criteria is flawed. I'd also note that I think that this language is fairly broad and is subject to interpretation. I can imagine somebody who wants to run for the Board of Health who is not sanctioned by the Board of Health under this warrant, if it passes, would challenge the warrant, which leads to delay and additional legal costs. So I'm opposed to it on a number of very fundamental policy issues, but also it's grounded in the experience of dealing with the general chemical issues this year.
Mark, do you have anything to comment on?
No, well, I think it's fundamentally undemocratic. I think that, we should be kind to future voters' hands. And I think we ought to leave it, the voters are smart enough, they know they need credentialed people in the way that board members are going to elect. I don't think we should tie future voters' hands. And, I don't think it's, what Chuck just said in terms of the whole general chemical situation. And, I think we've done a good job on that.
Okay, thanks. Peter had his hand up, and then Rebecca. Peter.
Yeah, first of all...
You have to say your name because there's a
Peter
phone person.
Liffenage, Doppingbrook Road. First, let me say I'm very glad that Mr. Morgan spoke for so long, because I was watching this on television and felt I should bring you some information you didn't have. And it goes to the reason that things move so slowly in the town. The last Board of Health meeting, the Board of Health members agreed to not take a position on either article, all right? And apparently you don't have that information. I listened to your discussion, and you said, well, you're waiting to hear how they feel about these articles. Their last meeting, they took the position that they would not take a position on either article. That was a consensus of the board that we reached at the last meeting. So you no longer need to put that in your minds as, oh my gosh, I wonder how they feel about this. That's where their standing is. So you need only wait to hear the results of the advisory hearing. I don't believe you need to wait for the results of the Board of Health position, because they've already stated it in open meeting.
Two people have, but only...
Hang on,
not
George.
three.
It's Rebecca's turn.
No, I'm not done.
You're not done. Then it's still
I'm
Peter's turn.
I'm sorry, I'm not done. Because I find it interesting that even under these conditions, Mr. Morgan finds anathema to the Board of Health, would actually qualify to be on the Board of Health. But I agree with the consensus opinion that making any kind of credentials for the Board of Health basically limits the number of people that might want to participate in town government. And in fact, a really smart person on the board would hire the expertise that we need, much as the Board of Selectmen hired the expertise they needed. The Board of Health should not simply rely on their own judgment. In fact, in complex situations, they should be seeking additional knowledge, either from their agent or from other professionals that they might hire. But I am absolutely against this article, and hope you understand or believe that I'm accurately reporting the Board of Health meeting, the last Board of Health meeting, where they took no position. We would not take a position on either article. And Mr. Morgan has already mentioned that that's only 2 out of 3 members. 2 out of 3 members decide what happens in that board, and they decide not to take a position.
Okay. Rebecca, your turn.
I did not want to discuss at the meeting, so it wasn't discussed. And that's the reason the board didn't take a position.
What do you mean it wasn't discussed?
Hey, Peter, she let you talk. Hang
I
on.
said, I told the board it was a citizen's position, and I didn't want the board to discuss it and vote. And so there was...
I am a
they
little
asked me if
confused
I
by,
wanted to
I'm
discuss
a little confused by your role, though. You are a proponent.
I was the
You're the
original
organizer of
author
this. Okay.
this petition, and I wanted to do that. I apologize that I was late, like I
Well,
was
that's-
today, and I missed
When
the
you go
beginning.
on my phone, I can't hear you. I really can't.
Yeah, and actually, Rebecca, I forgot to ask you to say I know who you are, but
That's
because
okay.
Mark's on the squawk box here, you need to say your name, address.
I'm Rebecca Honeywell, and I sit on the Board of Health, but I'm a citizen who wrote this as a citizen's petition.
Okay.
So this is not representing the board. This is representing my professional opinion. And in contrast to Mr. Yan's interpretation, the Board of Health has a lot of responsibility to make decisions on a daily basis, which are often requiring interpretation of scientific data, and it's beneficial for the members of the board to have, and members of the board bring their scientific experience with them to the board and make those decisions in very complex or controversial situations like the recent 40B debates over the fields of Sherborn. There were scientists who were hired. However, the intent of this warrant was not to exclude individuals, but more to enhance the ability of the board to achieve its goal, which is to effectively protect the health needs of the town and the natural resources of Sherborn, which have some unique characteristics. In professions of health and science and environmental science, most sciences, it's standard procedure for credentialing to be used to maintain licensure, to show your experience and ability to make good decisions. As far as it pertains to the town, the intent was to allow the board to work efficiently to make decisions which are in the true interest of public health and the environment, and to make decisions which would be defensible decisions if the town ends up in a situation of liability. Having people bringing, and many people will bring many, have the ability to bring many things to the table. So the original intent was actually to enhance the ability of the board to function with its day-to-day responsibilities. There are a couple other points that were the basis of this decision. One was for, I mentioned, liability protection, making defensible decisions. Scientific evidence, I think it's established that it's easier to interpret complicated scientific data and subtle things when a background of science is in a person's individual experience. However, there are a lot of different ways that can be done. For example, you mentioned a licensed sanitarium. Obviously, that person would have a background in natural science. And in our town, we have some unique circumstances which are very, very hard to, that are very complicated, and that ranges from the fact that we are one of only 4 towns in the Northeast region which has no public water supply that is municipally owned and regulated. They're all private systems. So the consequences, there's no requirements for testing the water except for the intransient, and in the fields discussions this year, we had scientists who were completely contradicting each other. We had to try to interpret the data ourselves to make the decision that we felt was best under the circumstances. It was clear to me that it would be beneficial for members of the board to work together to be able to understand some of those issues. That was the basis.
We've got to cut you off. Chuck,
That's
let's point out
okay.
we do have one more article that we need to
Yeah.
get to on this. So we're gonna stop that discussion. I know you're going to pick it up with the advisory,
That's
but now we
okay.
have to consider whether to schedule a town meeting for October 24th to address a potential solar energy project, a second special town meeting.
Great, I was getting a little nervous there that we were going to run out of time. We had an opportunity to do a solar project. That solar project is located on the CM&D roof. Our energy committee came to our selectmen's meeting, our last selectmen's meeting, and said that they thought it was possible to put together a deal before some important credits expire in January. And if they were able to get that deal done, for it to happen, there had to be a town meeting vote that would authorize this. So we wanted to take the steps necessary to set the stage to enable our energy committee to do what it can do, to see if it's feasible and advantageous to do a project of solar power on the roof of the CM&D garage. Therefore, with the assistance of town council, we've prepared 2 articles for a second special town meeting, which would occur immediately following the first town meeting. The 2 articles are One, to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into an agreement for the purchase of electricity and/or net metering credits generated by a solar voltaic facility to be installed on the roof of the CM&D garage at 7 Butler Street, with such agreement to be for a term of up to 20 years, on such terms and conditions as the Board of Selectmen deems to be in the best interest of the town. And two, to take all actions necessary or appropriate to administer and implement such agreement, or to take any other action relative thereto. The second article
Running out
prepared...
of time, so let's just summarize the second article probably, because I think they've got to start. at
Okay, the
7.
second article is basically the same except to authorize what's known as a pilot agreement, payments in lieu of taxes. So where you have a facility that's on public property, you don't tax the town, but instead you can put together an agreement by which the generator of the electricity who installs the panels pays taxes to the town, in addition to lease payments and the like. So what these two articles do, the suggestion is to put them on a warrant now for this meeting. By the time the meeting gets convened, we're hoping to be further down the road. We'll have a sense of whether this is a go or not to go. If it's not going to work, then we will ask for no action on these articles. If it turns out that the agreement can be put together and it is a go and the roof is structurally sound and legally everything falls into place, then we'll be asking for authorization to the board to enter into these agreements. But obviously, even then, if these articles pass, the board won't enter into any agreement unless we determine that it's feasible, it works, and it's going to be an advantage to the town.
So this is not being considered by advisory tonight. This is a new article on a new, technically a separate town meeting. And I think what we need to do now is decide if we're going to put this on for a town meeting on March 24th. And I think we have a suggested motion.
Oh, we do good.
I think we've already voted to call the meeting and to essentially put Article 1 on, and that occurred at our last meeting.
I'm looking for the formal motion that David gave us for this meeting. David, do you have that motion?
Well, we're looking for that. Kudos to Paul and Mike who've worked with town council. This came up at our last meeting 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, and
Less than that, yeah.
the drafting has been extensive, and so kudos to both Paul, who took the lead, Mike, for working with town council to come up with this.
I did nothing on this. This was Paul and David, I think. actually.
Okay, well, kudos to Paul.
We all helped on this.
I brought you some factual information. That was about it. Okay, so we have a motion. Do you want to make that motion?
Sure, I move that the Board of Selectmen call a special town meeting to be held on, and what date did we? October 24th, 2016, for the purpose of authorizing the Board of Selectmen to enter into a long-term agreement for up to 20 years for the purpose of implementing a solar project on the CM&D garage roof.
Could you accept a friendly amendment?
Certainly.
Which is that the Board of Selectmen adopt and issue the 2016 special town meeting warrant that's before us, containing these two articles.
Okay. So
Accepted.
I'll second both of those motions. Mark, any comments on this?
Yes, the email I'm looking at is 30 years or 20 years.
This is a 30-year agreement or a 20-year agreement, David?
20, up to 20 years.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, great. All right, so
I'm good.
let's take a vote. We have to do a roll call vote. Paul's drinking, so I'll ask Chuck to
Aye.
vote. Okay, Paul?
Aye.
Mark?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm aye also. So that's a 4-0 vote to set a second special town meeting for October 24th after the initially scheduled special town meeting. No? Jeannie's saying no, we're not doing that?
You are, but when I talked to Corey, we thought we would open the first town meeting and have the second town meeting at 7:30.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be at the end. In other words, we would open the town meeting, we would go through everything that, the opening remarks, do the Article 1, then adjourn to do this town meeting and then go to the last two articles.
Whatever our moderator wants, we will do.
And one of the reasons for handling it that way is you have to have quorum for the second town meeting as well as the first, and if you wait to the end, you may not have it.
See, this is why we've got good people in that role, so thank you.
The warrant that we just voted calls the second special time meeting for 7:30.
So we're good?
Yes.
Okay,
So that's what you want.
great. I just explained it wrong. But, so we voted, and we're all set, I think.
Well, just one final comment. I think advisory has to have
We're
a
going to have
hearing.
a public hearing on October 13th on
Great.
that article, which is next Thursday. Right, Jeannie, we're
Yep.
set for that, so it'll be at 7 o'clock next Thursday.
Okay. Great, thank you. All right, so we are still in session, but it's not our meeting anymore. It's turned over to advisory.
Welcome to the advisory public hearing. I'm going to start just by reading kind of how we proceed with each article, and then I'll read the, so let me just proceed with how this is held. The format of the public hearing for each warrant article is as follows. The proponent of the article is invited to make a presentation, which will be limited to 5 minutes. I'm going to have somebody up here. Can you keep time, Susan? Okay. They'll be limited to 5 minutes for their presentation. The chair opens the meeting for public comment and questions by all those present. All those public comments will be limited to 2 minutes. The chair closes time for public comments and questions and opens the meeting to the advisory committee for questions and comments. After the advisory committee discussion, the chair opens the meeting for any new public comment on the article. At any time during the discussions, an advisory committee member may request additional information from the article proponent or other resources. In this circumstance, the public hearing on the particular article will be placed in recess until the final public hearing session. After all new comments are heard, the chair will bring the public hearing on the particular article to a close and open the voting session. The format for each voting session is as follows. The chair requests a motion for the disposition of the warrant article. Advisory committee members discuss and deliberate the merits of the article and the pending motion. During the discussion, an advisory committee member can request a deferral of the vote on the warrant article. The chair will honor such request and defer the vote on the article to the final voting session. At the conclusion of the voting session discussion, the chair moves the motion on the article to a vote. So I will start with Article 1. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money, and if so, what sum for unpaid bills, or take any other action thereto. We have a list of 3 unpaid bills. One from CM&D to the Millis Police Department for $416.56. Second from CM&D for MHQ vehicle repair, $1,937.78, and the third from CM&D Shady Tree Landscaping, Field and Lawn Mowing, $3,325. So I assume we don't have anything that you need to present. So do we have any public comment?
We did vote on it, so the
Okay.
chair's going to report.
Well, I was going to go when public comment came, but you just asked for public comment.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
we voted 4-0 to support this article.
Okay.
Just a ministerial cleanup type article.
Yes, thank you. Do we have any other public comment? So then we go to, do we have any questions or comments from advisory? Okay, any new public comments? So the comments are closed. I'm going to open it for voting. Do I have a request for a motion?
So moved.
Okay. Second? Second. Okay, do we have any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Votes 8-0. Great. Now, Article 2. to see if the town will vote to amend its general bylaws by adding the following new Section 15 to Chapter 3. Section 15, Fire Chief. In addition to the Fire Chief's authority under the State Board of Fire Prevention Regulations, the Fire Chief or the Fire Chief's designee may require review by an independent third party with expertise in the matter of any proposed or completed work, plans, construction, applications, or other matters requiring fire protection, fire code, or fire department review. Such third-party review shall be at the applicant's expense. The fire chief or the fire chief's designee shall obtain from the third-party reviewer a proposal outlining the costs for the third-party review, and the costs as set forth in the third-party reviewer's proposal shall be paid by the applicant to the town in advance of the third-party reviewer performing the services. The fire chief shall make the final determination as to whether the proposed or completed work, plans, construction, applications, or other matters comply with fire protection, fire code, and fire department requirements, or take any other action relative thereto. David, do you explain what this is for, Dave?
This article came about when Acting Chief McPherson needed some expertise outside of what we had available to us to review the Abbey Road sprinkler system. So at that point, Acting Chief McPherson thought it would be good with these other developments that are pending that we try to implement something that puts the cost of that expertise being brought in from the outside on the applicant. So passing this would allow us to pass that expense on to the applicant as opposed to the town eating the cost on it.
Okay, and the Board of Selectmen voted to support this 4-0 also.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any public comment? Not seeing any. Do we have any questions or comments from advisory? Go ahead, Jeff.
David, quick question for you. I'm wondering if what's the status of our regulations? I know the Board of Health has to look at more complex regulations for these multi-unit dwellings. Will we also need external expertise for the fire department? Do we need to modify any of our fire codes or regulations to address these units, or are we relying primarily on state codes?
The trend is federal fire codes, and then the state adopts codes, and that's what we go under. There's a state fire marshal, so the code should be all consistent.
Okay.
It's a state code exclusively.
Okay.
We can't make our own rules on
George, can I comment?
Go ahead.
So a quick question on this. As far as the independent third party who would be doing the work, is there any basically who picks that independent third party? The developer themselves, the fire chief or his designee? Is there any sort of criteria for this work?
The person responsible for conducting the investigation or the inspection right now is the fire chief. So this person would be operating as his designee, but since they're a contractor, it's going to be under their professional license. So it would be somebody schooled in fire sciences, and we happened to get somebody that was involved in writing the state fire code as the expert on this last one, but it would be up to the fire chief.
So we don't have to, in the wording, there's no need to restrict anything about what sort of pedigree or certifications the inspector, the independent party would need.
No, I mean, they're going to have to be a licensed fire inspector.
Okay, that works.
I have a question. David, it wouldn't necessarily then always be the same person, or it would always be the same person?
It would probably not always be the same person. We just happen to find the person who is involved in writing the most recent state codes, and we're able to get them. So.
But it wouldn't. It doesn't matter.
It can be right. It can be somebody else. It can be a firm, or it could be an individual.
Any other questions from up here? Do we have any other public comment? All right, I'm going to close comments and open it for voting. I'll request a motion.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, do we have any discussion? Okay, I'll take a vote then. All those in favor?
Aye.
No, 8-0. All right, Article 3. to see if the town will vote pursuant to the General Laws Chapter 41, Section 2, to increase the number of members of the Board of Health from 3 to 5, or take any other action relative thereto. I know Aaron Carroll has a presentation for us.
Let's just grab it. Oh, you know what? I did make copies for. Ready? Okay, sorry. Erin Carroll, 2 Russet Hill Road. I'm here to present the citizens petition for the expansion of the Board of Health from 3 to 5 members. We want to share with you tonight our thoughts and perspectives on why growing the Board of Health from 3 to 5 members is in the best interest of Sherborn and its residents. This is important to us because we feel that the Board of Health is not reflective of other town boards and committees, compounded by lengthy meetings that prohibit resident participation and open acknowledgement of the increased workload that they have faced over the last 18 months. We feel it's critical to have a board that's efficient, productive, and prepared to face the unprecedented growth that's happening or will happen soon in our town. We would like more residents to participate, streamline where possible, and broaden the discussions and decisions beyond 3 people. Oh, that's not, okay. That's not right. As we all know, the Board of Health is one of the most impactful and influential boards in our town. The work that they do and the decisions they make affect every resident in Sherborn. It's a broad and all-encompassing mandate protecting the health of Sherborn residents. Sherborn, like many of our other town boards and committees, is a beneficiary of many hardworking and dedicated volunteers. Other boards and committees have more than 3 members, which allows for diversity of thought and perspective, broader skill sets and experiences, manageable workloads, and participation for more residents. The Board of Health stands out as a place where great power is concentrated in the hands of just a few people. We want to recognize that the Board of Health performs a public service that is every bit as important as the work done by other Sherborn boards which benefit from larger memberships. Sherborn is unique in many ways, as we've heard many, many times, but there are other towns in the Commonwealth that rely nearly 100% on private water and septic, Carlisle and Boxford being 2, and they both have 5-member boards of health. The rationale for a 5-member board is not political, it's not pro-growth, and it is not being sought as a way to ease regulation. We want the Board of Health to function as efficiently as other town boards while also acknowledging the growth that is occurring in our town and will continue into the foreseeable future. Just taking a snapshot of the months that the Fields of Sherborn project was actively discussed in April 2015 through April 2016, the Board of Health held 20 bi-monthly regularly scheduled meetings. However, in addition to those meetings, they also held 15 special Board of Health meetings, with the longest meeting running nearly 6.5 hours. That is a 75% increase in meetings during that time period and over approximately 45 hours of additional discussion. As the chairperson just recently said, and I quote, "It's no surprise to anyone that the Board of Health has been having late meetings often for over a year, but we have a lot of work," end quote. These lengthy Board of Health meetings run well into the late evening or early morning hours. It is not efficient, and it's definitely not fair to residents who want to actively participate in those meetings. With a 5-member board, 2 members can work together outside of a public meeting without deliberation and bring their findings back to the board, creating a more efficient and streamlined discussion. We have seen other boards use this tool, including the Board of Selectmen, who successfully expanded from 3 to 5 members in 2014. We believe that a board with a larger membership also allows for less influence from a single point of view. We would like to see a board that is welcoming of diverse experiences and perspectives, inclusive rather than exclusive, while all focused on protecting the health of Sherborn residents. It's okay. The Board of Health is very busy, even in their own words. The reality is there's not a slowdown in sight.
Beyond the ongoing review of routine applications, the Board of Health has started to address and revise current regulations. This is a time-consuming process and one that has already been through 2 public hearings lasting over 6 hours without one single vote. Again, a working group could have streamlined this discussion. The board is also responsible for ongoing governance and administrative changes, and then factor in all of the growth that our town is facing. The time spent on the fields is just a representation of what is to come. We should have more members on the Board of Health to work on these projects, address our regulations and the changes that need to be made in a timely manner, transparently define and implement governance procedures, and streamline the workflow through working groups. We want what's best for Sherborn. We are raising our families in this town, and we're committed to staying here. We're grateful for everyone who has served on the Board of Health and who is currently serving on the Board of Health. But we do want our Board of Health to be reflective of other town boards that benefit from larger membership, broader perspectives, greater resident participation, and productive and efficient meetings. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, now going to open it up for public comments. Please come to the microphone if you're going to make a public comment. State your name and you have 2 minutes.
Danny Rubin, 26 Elliott Street. I'm bothered by the fact that there seems to be such a rush. We've had the current structure, which has protected the water and the septic for probably 80 years. Now all of a sudden we have to call a special town meeting to change it. I think it's bad judgment from the advisory board to get involved in what really appears to be partisan politics. You wait for the annual town meeting, you have a larger crowd, more diversity of opinion, and probably a range that would be more attractive than this small group in this partisan issue. So I would strongly recommend for the advisory board to maintain its reputation of being above politics, not being partisan, that it vote no action on this and delay taking up the issue until the annual town meeting.
64 South Main Street.
You're good.
I support this article, mainly because of the previously stated reasons of the workload and also getting input from a broad spectrum of our citizens.
Can you turn that on, please?
I'm not too sure on the top.
Peter Olson, is that better? Peter Olson on Doppingbrook Road. I've served on the Board of Health for over 20 years, and I'm clearly on record of favoring an increase in the number of the Board of Health members. I'm personally aware of the amount of work that the board does. I'm personally aware of the, what do you want to call it? Maybe the stumbling blocks of 3 members not being able to find agreement when, in fact, diversity of opinion and 5 members would be able to come to a vote. I think it's extremely important in this time of tremendous increased workload on the Board of Health and complex projects and complex issues facing the Board of Health, that there be a wide diversity of opinion and that those people have the wisdom to seek professional opinion and professional guidance when necessary. But I think that going to 5 is a vast improvement, as even demonstrated by the improvement on the Board of Selectmen. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
George Morgan, 41 Bear Hill Road. I made the observation a while ago on Mr. Sherborn's exchanges that this move to increase the number of people on the Board of Health is more of a solution in search of a problem. It's everybody else's opinion that the Board of Health needs help. It's not been the expressed opinion of the Board of Health itself that it needs additional people on the Board of Health. The deliberations that have been going on the Board of Health are likely that is true, and that is occasioned largely by the already large diversity of opinion that is being brought to various issues before the Board of Health. And time has been given to have all these opinions heard in public meetings. The issues that the Board of Health faces at this point are issues that actually they've demonstrated they are able to handle with 3 people. The deliberations that went on for a considerable period of time with the TRASC project did result in a set of conditions that are professionally done, timely, and appropriate for what a Board of Health does. It has not been seen in any case during this set of deliberations that this could have been accomplished any better with 5 people than with 3. We have the finished, accomplished fact of this 27-page set of conditions that went with the approval by the ZBA for the TRASC project as an example of how a Board of Health with 3 people actually does function well and already has done so. If you are going to have more than 3 people on the Board of Health, you need to establish where the Board of Health has in fact failed in its mission as a 3-member board, and to show how more people on the Board of Health would actually rectify such a issue with the Board of Health. That has yet to be seen. Thank you.
Warren Wheelwright, 137 Hunting Lane. 5-member board, increasing it from 3, is deceptively attractive. It says broader discussion, increased resident participation. But I submit to you, it is counter that. And the best example I have for you is the Board of Selectmen increase from 3 to 5. You didn't have a choice in any of the open positions last voting period. Where did it get settled? In the session of caucus. And caucus is settled by who shows up. And when there was one presented against the other 2 that were going in together as turned out to be a solid block, that one person couldn't go forward. You didn't get a choice of representation. You lose it. And the people who moved that growth from 3 to 5 knew their agenda was to promote development in this town. And they got it. But you didn't get to choose their qualifications because you didn't have a contest. When you have one person come up every year in every board, selectman or Board of Health, you have had a choice on the qualifications, and the Board of Health has had a choice the last 2 times. Don't give up that choice, and think about what happened at caucus last year. It's deceptive. It's not democratic. Thank you.
Hi, Lisa Camp, 291 Western Ave. I guess, hypothetically, I think that it does sound appealing, like some other speaker said, to go from 3 to 5, that it could broaden the perspectives. But having been at several of the Board of Health meetings and reading a lot of the posts and posting myself on Nextdoor Sherborn, I'm concerned that diversity of perspective is sort of code for being pro-development. And that the sense that some have that the current Board of Health is obstructionist. And I think that diversity of perspective can be excellent, and that if people who have experience in environmental science or chemistry or sometimes environmental law or some of these fields could broaden the perspective, I think that's great. But I think that it's really essential that whoever is on this board does not have an agenda and is neither pro-development nor anti-development, but interested in upholding the mission of any Board of Health, which is protecting the lands and waters and the public health of the community. So as long as that stays the mission, I think that we can have really good alignment. But I'm very concerned about some of the discourse that I've seen, some of it very offensive, actually, that has been maligning the current Board of Health for simply upholding our current regulations. And I think work does need to be done on revisiting the regulations, and I don't think anybody is against that, including the current members of the Board of Health. But I think to just say that, you know, they're maligning and obstructionist to development is not accurate and not constructive.
Can I jump in? Just so, I know I'm not in line, I didn't know if you want me to.
Well, yeah, I think Addie's been waiting and Bob, so. Okay. So, yeah, I'll have Addie go and then you, Molly, and then you, Bob, is that okay?
A lot of people to say something tonight.
Just state your name just so.
Addie Mae Weiss, 1 Jackson Road, and I'm just having witnessed the Board of Health at many meetings over the last year with the field. I can attest to we are very lucky to have an incredibly strong group of volunteers serving on our Board of Health with an incredible sense of integrity and incredible technical expertise that is going to be really hard to find similar candidates to if we do increase to 5. I am in support of increasing to 5. Maybe for good reasons that some other people are, but I see that there's a lot of dialogue going on in next door Sherborn. We have over 1,000 members in our town paying attention to next door Sherborn. I think that's a greater forum than we've ever had at town caucus or town meeting. I think people are aware the time for change has come. We may not like it. I'm not saying that we need to go, I hope we don't go to one extreme or the other, but there is a benefit to being able to have 2 members of a board work in a group to research something, not deliberate, but to research and to break down the workload. That cannot happen at all with a 3-person board of health.
Thank you. Molly?
I just wanted to, do I say, Molly Cullum, Goulding Street West. I just wanted to kind of piggyback off of what Lisa was saying, and that I agree with her. I think, we need to make sure the right candidates run, but I also think that is exactly why the town gets the vote. We are not proposing a specific candidate. We're not running somebody with somebody in mind. We can't put forth a candidate for the town, but they are going to go up for election, should this pass, in the regular town election in May. So the town does get a say on who represents them. And if they find somebody is not qualified, they have the opportunity to not vote for them or vote for a more qualified candidate that does run.
Thank you. Bob?
Delaney, 46 Pleasant. I'd like to second Addie Mae's point about a 5-member board allowing 2 people to meet away from the meeting and to plan or discuss or research. I think that's terribly important. I think the Board of Selectmen have found that out. And I'm very much in favor of a 5-member board.
Thank you, Bob.
Robert Johnson, 272 Western Avenue, and I would just like to second the idea that this article be looked at the regular town meeting. I think that there will be more people there, people without necessarily an agenda one way or the other. I don't see a great need for it to be acted on at this time. I think it would be much more appropriate to have it at the regular town meeting. It's not so far away. Thank you.
Susie Wheelwright, Hunting Lane. I also think that this should probably have waited for regular town meetings. Special town meetings are expensive. This seems to be the major reason that we're having this one. The other thing I'd like to say is that we are incredibly lucky to have had, over all the years that I've lived here, since 1973, talented people on the Board of Health who knew what they were doing. I question, however, the way the board meetings have been going in the last year in terms of civility and respect and some of the other things that I think Sherborn volunteers have a right to expect, whether you're going to find the qualified people in a town of this size that are willing to put up with what this board has put up with at their meetings this year. So I urge you to vote no action on this.
One thing I just want to clarify, because I've heard a number of comments about the special town meeting. I just want to clarify that if a citizen's petition is presented to the town, you have to have a special town meeting within a certain time frame. It wasn't a decision by, I just want to make sure I'm stating it correctly here, Mary, but if we have a citizen's petition, we have to have a special town meeting. So it's not that we chose, the advisory or the selectmen chose to have a town meeting. It was, we had a citizen's petition that we had to respond to. So. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Rebecca Honeywell, 104 Woodland Street. My main comment here is that a lot of these arguments seem to be arguments in support of the next article, because I don't think...
We're only discussing this article
I
right
understand
now.
that.
Thank you.
I don't think it's the number of the members of the board that matters for efficiency. Sometimes different chairs have different styles. Some are more accepting of comment from the audience. Sometimes other variables can influence the way a meeting runs. And I think that it's important to be sure that the arguments that we're using to justify changing the number of the board matters. The vast majority of cities and towns in Massachusetts, as well as many other states, have 3-member board. We have a very small population in Sherborn. I think who our board is comprised of might be more important for the efficiency and effectiveness of the Board of Health.
Thank you.
George, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, let me just see if there's any other public comment, and then we'll come up here for questions, Russ. All right, so if you want to make a public comment, do you have one, Ray? I do. Okay. Come on up, and then...
And George, I don't know when you want to hear from the selectmen.
Yeah,
but we did
after
not
these
vote
guys,
either.
I'll come over to you after we finish with the... after we do this, then I'll ask you guys, and then we'll come up here for
whenever you want.
questions. Okay, go ahead, Ray.
Ray Weiss, 21 Snow Street. I'm a builder. That's not a bad word. I live in a small house on 21 Snow Street, so I'm not pro-big house, pro-development. I'm pro-Sherborn because I own 2 properties in town. I own a business uptown, and I pay taxes on that. I own a house in town. I pay taxes on that. And I think I'm the kind of person who's going to live here after my kids graduate from school. So I moved here for all the rural reasons a lot of people moved here for. I work in Weston and Holliston and towns all over here where there are septic and water issues. And it's not regulatory per se. It's sort of like what happens to the citizen who wants to pull a by right permit. I don't even know if we have one of those in town. I recently had to help somebody in town get permission to re-renovate a basement that had mold, that was unhealthy, but I had to go through a Board of Health hearing because they weren't sure whether the right permit was pulled or not. And that cost the client time, money, and a health concern. And the Board of Health isn't here political. I turned off my Nextdoor. So if you had me on Nextdoor, I turned it off because I didn't like the chatter on both far ends. There's a middle that we need to hit. So I turned it off because I couldn't bother with the bickering. We need a policy and a procedure, and the biggest reason I'm arguing or supporting a larger board is that they are overwhelmed. There's not enough time. It was clear that there aren't enough people to do the work. There's a lot of work, and they could argue it out. And they could really do good things if they had more people to get work done. It's not the public forum and all that stuff. It's sort of like set up the policy, set up the procedure, and then make it easy for people to get through. Thank you.
Hi, Susan Taylor. I'm not sure whether my comments have already been said. As you sorry, I just came in the door. I have been on Nextdoor. I've made one comment ever, and I don't know if everybody's read it. The increase from 3 to 5 is not being done politically. It's being done because they need help. And I was a big proponent for the Board of Selectmen go 3 to 5. And I think the consensus is it's worked because they're able to get more work done. Right now, you have 3-member board, 2 Board of Health members cannot meet to discuss anything. They have a lot of data, a lot of research that needs to be done so that they can address what's going on in town as a whole, be it more building, be it present conditions, the wells, the water, and such. So if you have 5, 2 members can get together, they can work, they can get some of the data, they can formulate it and bring it to the full board. Work will get done. And again, this is not being done for political reasons. It's because we need to address what's going on. They need more help. When you have meetings that go to 1 o'clock in the morning, there's a good example of why they need some more help. Thank you.
Sir?
Chris Decker, Great Rock Road. I would affirm what she just said, the workload with the 40Bs. I mean, there's a pipeline of 40Bs, and one person hasn't come to the front yet, but that's Pulte. You're dealing with the number 1, number 2 house builder in the U.S. If they want to get something done, they're going to push. They're going to push hard, and you're going to need resources to deal with that. The second thing is I don't think we have anything to lose. They're volunteers. If we find enough people, great. If we don't find enough people, then we throw it back into the hamper. And it is nice to have a 5 board of selectmen because it gives the citizens more ability to reach the board of selectmen. And I think it's similar in this case. And the other point is that most 40Bs go through towns with public water, public sewer, and they're streamlined through the ZBA process. They don't have to deal with the B of H. Here, the B of H is going to be overburdened potentially with a lot of that that's taking place. Finally, someone mentioned that there's development going on here. The only development I've seen, I've lived here since 2000, the major development is the Abbey. Right now there's 24 houses that are in the process of being built in Dover. I don't think there's any houses being built here. So I don't think we've gone to the sky in terms of growth.
Thank you. Okay, do I have any other public comments? I know you wanted to say something, Mike?
No, I just wanted to say we had not voted because we wanted to defer and hear what folks had to say. And so I guess if it's okay with you,
Yeah, go ahead.
I would entertain a motion to see whether we would support this as a board or not. If somebody wants to make that motion.
So moved.
Okay, and I'll second that motion. Do we want any discussion up here, comments?
Well, on discussion, was it 2 years ago? The issue was to expand the Board of Selectmen. And I believe I was the only member of that board who was not opposed to expanding the Board of Selectmen to 5. And since it has been expanded, I have to say I've truly enjoyed my colleagues. We've got a wonderful group of people. They're very smart. They're easy to work with. I resonate with the argument that 2 people can talk. We didn't have that when I was on a 3-person board. So I think we have a great board. And so I see it as an improvement over the 3-person board that we had. So the same thing with the Board of Health. I think the Board of Health would benefit from having 5, just from my experience. My only hesitation is that I wanted to hear from the Board of Health themselves as to what their thoughts were. I wanted to give them an opportunity to give us the benefit of their insight. And I've heard that they decided not to do anything with this, and I'm not sure if that's true, but there is...
That was discussed at the last Board of Health meeting.
Well, that I would urge the Board of Health...
What happened at your Board of Health meeting?
It was brought up by our chair whether or not we should discuss it, and we chose to not discuss it and not make a determination. So we didn't vote on whether we supported it or not.
Actually, so they discussed it, but they did not vote to go
That's
one
what-
way or
It was
another.
discussed.
But it was discussed.
It was discussed.
Okay.
the benefits and risks, or, the discussion of whether we liked it the way it is or we're overworked, that was not discussed.
Okay.
I'm sorry. The
So
fact that there was a
no
warrant
vote.
article
Anyway,
was
there was
discussed.
no vote. I think your question is, was there a vote on it? There was no vote.
petition
So
was
okay, let's let them continue their discussion. Sorry.
Well, basically, just to finish up that thought, I'm hesitant about the Board of Selectmen taking a position with regard to another board who's not asking for this, but is not opposing this. It just seems like the Board of Health would do the community a better service if they would tell us what their own experience is and what their own thoughts were on that. So I wish we had that piece. But given the fact that I didn't oppose the expansion of the Board of Selectmen, I'm certainly not going to oppose the expansion of the Board of Health. I know what the benefits are.
Yeah, I would just note the point that was made about 2 members of the board being able to conduct research, do work, and then report back to the full board for a vote. There was a very specific example this year. The Board of Selectmen was very active in working with the DEP on the General Chemical site, which has the potential of causing serious public health issues in the Coarse Brook and northeastern tip of Sherborn. Mark Brandon and I were the 2 members of the board that did a lot of research, drafted letters for the board, and I found it to be extraordinarily helpful. The board retained the expertise to be able to respond to it. So,
and you did a great job.
Well, Mark Brandon did a great job, since he's not here to defend himself. But the rationale, I was on the Sherborn Governance Task Force Committee that proposed expanding the Board of Selectmen from 3 to 5, and I think the consensus, unanimous opinion of the board is that Selectmen is that it's worked for all the reasons that were articulated earlier. So that's the basis for my motion.
Yeah, and I would just point out, there's only 3 of us here today. We were still able to have a quorum. That would not have been possible 2 years ago. If even one member was missing, we would be without the ability to conduct business. And so we've got a if two members are gone, right? And so we've got a motion, I guess, on the table. It's been seconded. All in favor of supporting the article? Okay, so and I would say Mark Brandon asked us to convey his support as well. He was on by remote participation earlier. So it's a 3-0 vote with the 4th selectman also having weighed in.
Thank you. Okay. All right, I'm going to bring it up here for questions and comments, and then we'll come back to public comments after. So I know, Russ, you had a question, so I'll let
My
you.
question is similar to Paul's as to whether the Board of Health discussed it and officially voted, and I guess the answer is no, so I don't want to follow up on that.
He already got his answer.
Comments.
I think you already answered it.
No, do you want me to bring it to the board?
Go ahead. What are you asking?
My question is because we know the warrant article exists, but we didn't discuss it beyond the fact that it exists. And if you would like me to bring it to the board and have the board discuss it in a substantive way and vote on it, I would be glad to do that, but I think it wasn't on the agenda.
I mean, we're going to, as of now, we're planning on voting tonight. So
Okay, yeah,
I think it's
that's
a little.
why-
I think it's a little
yeah.
late for that.
Yeah.
So,
I would say that it would be nice to know how the board feels about expanding their own size, because the board would probably have be in the best position to decide whether they feel like it needs to be expanded or to bring forward all the good reasons not to expand. So George is right, and we're going to vote on it now, but I would have liked to hear it. I'm not being critical. Might have been helpful.
Yeah, I just want to speak up on the 1 of 2 advisory committee representing Board of Health, and I've attended almost every single meeting. Peter can back me up on this. I've been to almost every Board of Health meeting, including almost every Fields of Sherborn meeting in the past 3 and 4 years. So I'm pretty familiar with the Board of Health, and I think they've done an incredible job too. I'm smart enough not to be on next door Sherborn. I still am a Luddite, so I walk across the street and actually talk next door rather than doing it online. But what I would say is I think everyone's made good points tonight on both sides of the argument. My sense was I was at the Board of the Health meeting when they discussed the topic. They did not take a vote. I think the sense I got was that there wasn't necessarily a consensus. People had personal opinions on how they might vote on this when they vote at town meeting. And one of the reasons they're not here tonight is they're having a concurrent meeting tonight over in I think it's in the community center tonight. So that's why Rebecca's the only person in attendance tonight. So I didn't get a sense that they felt strongly one way or the other. They didn't take a vote, but I think the consensus was that they were going to make a personal decision. So I would just add that I am in favor of this. I think people have voiced good things about it, and we'll have to see whether we get qualified candidates. I think we will get qualified candidates, and I'm hopeful we will. And it is, as you said, it's on the warrant, and we can't change that fact. And we had to respond to a citizen's petition, so I'm in favor of it.
Thank you. I have one question in particular for Peter, because I know you were on the Board of Health for a long time as a 3-member board. I know, Rebecca, you could answer this as well. As a 3-member board, how many meetings were canceled because you couldn't get a quorum?
We had several meetings in recent years where one member was not able to be there, and the other member had a family emergency and couldn't show up. And the terrible part about that is that these are meetings where there are scheduled variance hearings, where the public is, where private citizens have come, they've marshaled their attorneys, they've marshaled their lawyers. Lawyers and attorneys are the same thing, but they've engineers and so forth. They have plans to present, and yet the meeting couldn't go forward. And that was really a shame. I was actually embarrassed a number of times in the last few years of my service when I had to sit there by myself and say, well, I'm sorry, we have to continue this meeting to a time and date certain, and that was it. It was a 5-minute meeting. So I think the ability to raise a quorum is a very good point, and I thank you for bringing it forward.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have questions or comments? Mary?
Sure. I have some comments. First, saying again basically what Peter said, is that because the Board of Health is dealing with people who need things and they need them now, and they are scheduled for a public hearing, if the board cannot raise a quorum, then that's a problem. And I look at the Board of Selectmen tonight, although one of them is leaving now. But the expansion to 5 there, I mean, in general, I think it has been a wonderful experience for the town. And it's true. I mean, we couldn't have had this tonight. There were 3 people here, and that if 2 people had been gone in the previous board, we'd have had 1 person left, and that would have been not good. I do see an increasing workload coming with 40Bs, and also, even without them, with an uptick in the economy, one might expect a number of new building permits being sought, and so just, whether it's a 40B or just a number of single-family homes being developed, I think the workload is going to increase. The other thing that I will just comment on is I've heard a lot of people tonight talking about the current members are doing a good job, and I don't see this as a referendum at all on the current members. Maybe the current members are the best 3 people you can find, but you can't guarantee that those people will be there the next time, or the next time, or the next time. And this is making a change in the process that the town will use going forward into the future. And so to say that the particular individuals who are holding that office now are excellent. It doesn't really say anything. It simply says the people who happen to be elected this time are good. And so I don't think that the qualifications or the abilities of the current people really have anything to do with the number of people who should be on the board. I think there are a number of arguments to be made for expanding the board. Customer service, ability to have a quorum, with a couple of people missing. And also, you know, I'm on a 9-member board. I heard Frank speak about he's on a 5-member board. I was at the regional school committee last night, and the capital committee there spoke, the technology subcommittee there spoke. These are all boards that have been able to have people go off, do a little work on the side, bring it back to the larger board for discussion and vote. And so for that reason, I think there's nothing to be lost by expanding the board, and I'm for it.
Do you have any comments, Steve? One other comment I wanted to make is I've been to a few Board of Health meetings this year as well, and I've actually heard Rebecca say at a few of these meetings, well, I can't talk to anybody outside of I don't know about this because I was never able to talk to somebody outside of the meeting. And I think that's just counterproductive to have like basic discussions of data that's not being considered for a vote, but just learning about the things that you're going through to be able to discuss outside with 2 members of a board. I think that's critical to getting a lot of work done. So as Jeff said, I'm fully in support, and I agree with Mary too. I think the selectmen have done a wonderful job as a 5-member board, and I think that's a great example of what we could potentially get with an expanded Board of Health. So I'm in support of this as well. If we don't have any other questions or comments up here, I'll open it back up for additional public comments. So, Mary.
I was on the fence about this for quite a long time.
And you are?
Oh, I'm Marion Neutra, 25 Prospect Street. Thank you. I have been on the fence about this, largely because the Board of Health, that are 3 excellent people working their butts off, excuse the expression, have been beat up rather badly lately, and I think very unjustifiably so. So I was willing to go with their felt needs. But on the other hand, I'm on the planning board, which is 5 people, and I must say we could not get the work done that we now have on our plate if we had 3 people. It would be impossible. We do a lot of work as teams of 2 and come back, and it's a tremendous advantage, and it's been said before, but I just want to reiterate that. My only concern is that given the unjustified bad press that the Board of Health has been getting lately for upholding the regulations that they have to uphold and for working very hard, I'm concerned that people throughout town, and I think we do have people out there in the woods that are very qualified to take this sort of job on. My concern is that they might have been scared off a bit by the dialogue that's been going on lately. So this is just a call to everybody here, including myself, to try to set things on a very positive note and to support the idea that being on the Board of Health is a crucial position, and we need the best. If we have a 5-member board, we need 2 more of the best, because my concern is that come round to caucus, or whenever the 2 extra members are nominated and voted on, that we may not have candidates that are willing to do this very difficult job. So I think we all have to work to encourage people to consider it.
Thank you. Nancy? Rebecca, do you have another comment? I just didn't want to skip over you. I know you're standing there, so, okay.
Nancy Hess, 64 South Main Street. I heard someone question the urgency of this, and if I understand correctly, if you don't do the special town meeting now, you cannot put someone up for election at the next, is that correct?
That is
So I
correct.
think that that's worth noting for people, that it's not a political push, it's a matter of how quickly you can get the extra people on the board.
Just to clarify that, Nancy, I think if this is, when the selectmen expanded, it had to be through a special act through the legislature. Am I correct, Paul?
Yes.
This is not through a special act. This is,
Well, actually, the way it's drafted, it is through a special act.
this one is a
The
special act?
proposed motion that town council came up with is a special act, and therefore it's not likely it's going to be enacted in time for the upcoming election. That's the reality of, because the legislature's not in session right now, it's got informal sessions.
Okay.
So you're working under a different timeline because...
To be quite, I haven't seen that motion because I know the original motion, or what the citizens petition,
Are you confusing this on number 4?
I think number 4 is a special act.
Number 3 is a special act as it is on your proposed motions.
It says to see,
No.
No?
it says will vote pursuant to general laws, chapter 41, section 2, to increase the number of.
I'm reading the motion itself, George. It says, I move the town vote to petition the legislature for a special act. That's what it at least says on our...
Oh, I don't have that on.
Okay.
I don't have that yet. We haven't had a motions. Corey, can you? I mean,
I would say, we have not had our motion.
yeah, we haven't had a motions meeting yet, so we haven't finalized any motions.
All right, this was what was provided to us. I don't know where it came from, but...
Okay, sorry. And I know the motion, their intent is to expand it as. Aaron, if you could address this, that would be.
Sure. So we could go to a special act. We decided not to go to special act, and in part knowing that if waiting for town meeting, which was also brought up, that would mean, as Nancy just mentioned, someone would not be voted into the Board of Health until 2018, and we feel that because of everything going on with growth and whatnot, we didn't want to go through. We didn't want to wait. I think that that's at the expense of the town and residents and everything else going on. So the way that it is set up is one person would be voted in May of 2017, and the second person would be voted in May of 2018.
You gotta manage that. But we're just working off what town council provided us as your motion, so...
Okay, yeah, we haven't...
The first we've heard, it's not your motion.
Like Corey said, we're having a motions meeting. David, I think it's on the, or Corey, is it on the 14th or 15th or somewhere?
I believe it's on Tuesday, the
17th.
17th.
Yes, that's when we're coming up with our final motions, so I think we would...
We are not
Motion-
going to pursue the special act.
The special act is not part of the motion.
Okay, so I
I'll
think...
clarify that
I think
with
there was
council.
poor communication between our town administrator, town council, and
Okay.
the proponents, maybe, I don't know, but that's, we got a different message, so...
Okay, sorry.
Does anybody want to reconsider? It's not you. It's happened at this end. Do you want to reconsider the vote, or are we still good with this?
No, as I said before, I think...
Okay. That's fine. I just want to make sure we vote on the right
We're
thing.
working as a board very nicely, I have to say.
Thank you.
George, if I may, I guess I wondered, though, now, if the warrant article is the language of the warrant article, my understanding is that it can't change. So,
Corey, can you come up to the microphone just so everybody can hear you? Sorry.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have spoken out of turn like that. The warrant simply is the notice of intent and lays out the topic. The specifics are always included in the motion. That's what really counts. So that the method of enactment, I'd still allow a motion that specified a method of enactment. It's within the four corners of the article.
well, I understand, Corey, but I wonder whether people in town will be confused, may not even show up if they're only reading, the warrant article here is one sentence in
Let's
what we
hope-
have. So if that's really what it is, I think it does a disservice to this article, to be honest with you. If it's not, for example, this is the first time I heard tonight that if it's enacted, that only one person will be elected next May and another person a year later. I didn't know where any of those details are.
Hopefully, the report of the advisory committee, which is mailed to everyone in town after this meeting,
So it
will
won't
clarify
be in,
that.
So to clarify, it won't be in the warrant article, but it will be, we can put those details in our write-up explaining it?
Certainly.
Correct.
And if you go back and look at past warrant articles and past write-ups, you'll see that's frequently the case. A warrant article is a skeleton, and then you'll see that when the proposal actually comes forward, it's got some flesh on it. And the motion reflects the flesh.
This one's more skeletal than I've ever seen in my 5 years on advisory, I'll have to tell you.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, and Jeff, maybe if it helps to clarify this a little, we were given a draft motion from town council through the town administrator, which apparently is not something that the proponents are proposing. So they are with the one-sentence article that you're referring to. The reason for the staggered election is because the one-sentence article refers to a statute. That's how that statute is implemented. So it's all in there. Everything that does is
The
in
warrant
there.
article would read by special act if they wanted to increase it from 3 to 5 this year, but this statute, as you said, specifically says they can increase it by adding a
I
member.
mean, my
each year.
suggestion would be we stop talking about special act because that's not what
Right,
the
exactly.
proponents want to do. If they're telling us that, then it won't be moved to town meeting, can't be.
Right.
And we really shouldn't be paying
Correct.
attention to that.
No, but I think in our write-up, we need to be much more specific, more than we have been in prior articles, because I think it's really miscommunication to the citizens of the town right now, because there's not enough detail on
I think
there
it
for
would
them
be.
to make
I
a
think
decision.
it would be on us if we vote to support this to explain what the motion will be at town meeting.
It sounds like you would want to explain what Chapter 41, Section 2 does.
Absolutely.
But from the proponent's standpoint, they drafted a whole article in this one sentence because that statute exists, and
So
what
we
it
could-
says is what it says.
Exactly. So we can quote that statute in our write-up.
And that
Absolutely.
that statute was the basis for the expansion of this board from 3 to 5.
Right, and we did get that from town council.
Okay.
That was,
Thank you. Addie, I think you were next. Sorry.
One Jackson Red, just, it seems to me that my sense of when the Board of Selectmen went from 3 to 5, that it was a similar citizens petition, and that set the precedent for how this might happen. And it seems it would be an awkward position to put our Board of Health in to force them to vote whether they support or not, that it seems, as much as this is not a, these are going to be elected positions, so politics do come to play to an extent, but we do hope that we have qualified candidates. And in order to move forward as a town, we need to ensure that we have multiple voices heard, and for the Board of Health to be forced to say whether they do support it, then they're forced to say that, oh yes, they couldn't handle the job. And if they're forced to say they don't support it, then they're forced to, they can never cry uncle. I mean, it's just an awkward position to put the Board of Health in.
Just for the record, I don't think anyone is forcing them to vote.
So I'm concerned now, George. We just pulled up that statute. It doesn't say anything about electing one year, one subsequent year.
That was the interpretation that the town council gave.
That's how that's read or interpreted. Yeah.
It's not in the language. We've got the statute right here. It's not in the
We're
language.
You should have town council. You should really have town council. Town council has given her opinion on this, and
I'm not
she's.
disagreeing with town council at all. What I'm saying is, I don't think I really am concerned now that we're not fairly communicating what's being voted on.
That's what
I
we're
understand that we're going to write. I understand all of that, but I'm actually appalled that it's gotten this far without getting more language involved.
I do think we discussed it though. When you presented the warrant, we talked about time when they presented the warrant to us the first time at meeting, not 2 meetings ago. They did talk about when people would be added.
I haven't seen that, and I don't.
Well, we did talk about
We
it.
did talk about it at one of our advisory meetings.
yeah, because
When Erin first presented, she did talk about what the timeline was. One would come on, and then
Right.
another would stagger on. So we
Right.
did have that
And I was-
discussion with advisory.
Thank you. And we did speak with town council about what the warrant would, or what the article would look like, and we were never advised otherwise that we had to build it out in a way that explained it. So we're happy to build it out so that it is reflective of that.
Warren, did you have a comment?
Thank you. It seems to me that this quorum of 2 out of 3 expanding to 3 out of 5 is a convenient argument, that it just ignores the acrimonious issues that have been going on, the attack on the agent, which taken up the Board of Health time. The Board of Health needed support from the selectmen on that, the town administrator and the rest. You're ignoring all of that with a convenient argument, because I was on the selectmen for 6 years, and we got by with 2 with a quorum. And I'll tell you, the other convenient argument here is, oh, you have more people to work on a project. Well, we always had subcommittees. We appoint subcommittees. You can select 2 people that come with 2 diverse opinions and put them on the project and report back to the selectmen. This allows collusion on the part of 2 or 3 that get voted in with no contest, no assurance that they're qualified for the work. So heads up, I hear a lot of convenient arguments here for this that don't make sense. When you can delegate, you can have subcommittees. Thank you.
Hi, George Honeywell, 104 Woodland, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but the discussion just before said 1 person comes on in May of 17 and 1 in May of 18, as I understand it. And my question is, does that mean there's a 4-member board for a year?
Yes.
And how do they resolve issues?
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Have a lot of 2 and 2 votes.
Maybe.
What does the homeowner do?
Just, the Conservation Commission also had 6 people for a period of time, and they seem to manage.
Yeah, and we kind of feel, well, we feel like, I mean, it might be a short-term issue or a challenge, rather, for a long-term solution. I mean, we would be willing to have the greater benefit of having a larger board. I mean, we're looking short-term if we're looking in 1 year. If we did the special act, we wouldn't have 2 people until 2018.
Do you have, okay.
Yeah.
Any other public comments? We got another article to get through, so I want to make sure it's moving the conversation forward. So, but
Yeah,
go ahead,
yeah,
and
2
not
points.
reiterating the same stuff.
No, you speak of quorum issues with a 3-member board, but the majority of the boards in the state are 3-member boards, and they don't seem to have enough quorum issues to warrant the state considering that boards themselves should be expanded from 3 to 5. Secondly, the logic for going from 3 to 5, as given so far, is primarily theoretical. It doesn't really address the actual day-to-day operation of the present board. As I mentioned earlier, you need to actually identify where the present board actually is not doing the job that it would be better done by 5. That we have yet to see. There's been a lot of intervention type of discussion here about people believing the Board of Health has these issues, but we've not actually had anything from the Board of Health, and it may not be the case that we'll get something from the Board of Health agreeing with this proposition that they need more help.
Right.
The 2 points I'd just like to make quickly are that the world is more complex now. With all due respect to the gentleman who's served previously, when I started building, I'd walk into a town hall and I'd tell Jim that I was going to go remodel a bath. Now I have to have architectural plans, and the town takes my workers' compensation insurance, and the amount of work generated just to apply for a permit now, so the town doesn't get sued by somebody, is vast. And I think our board, that's part of their workload. A case recently in town, my client was required to record their Title V at the Registry of Deeds. I went to my attorney because they just wanted to finish the project, and I said, and he's a local guy, does a lot of work. He said, they won't record this. It's a non-recordable document, but the current board wanted us to do it. And he said, Ray, what I'll do is I'll submit it 3 or 4 times till a new clerk gets it and records it. In fact, that's what happened. So it was a document that we couldn't even require someone to record. And those types of things, he said, I'm not sure why that board hadn't been sued. It's the workload, not the competency level. It's the amount of work. We need more people to do that because the world is becoming more complex. That's what they need the help with so that our town's in a little better shape.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I'm going to close public comment and open it up for voting to the advisory committee. So I have a request for a motion.
So moved.
Do a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion.
I'm only going to say that I'm in favor of it, as I mentioned earlier, but my favorable view is subject to the wording of how it's written up. I think this is a lesson learned for us.
Yeah, and I think
this was well written or well prepared.
And I think that's what we can explain. Oh, go ahead, Ben.
I don't know what difference. If you don't want an expansion, you vote no. And I don't know why anyone would.
Well, I think you need to
Vote for it
understand
only
what the
if-
word expansion means and the timing and everything else, and what George accurately brought up about having a year of 4 members. I just think this is a lesson learned for us that we need more detail in a warrant article than what this one has. And that's just my opinion.
And I do
we
think
can justify that, but some people base whether they're going to come or not on what's in the warrant article itself, not the motion.
George, may I comment on that? Just so people are clear, because I think Jeff's giving a little bit of a, maybe he doesn't mean to impugn the selectmen by those comments. This is a citizen article, Jeff. This was a petition that circulated.
No, I
this didn't
understand.
come from town council or from town government. It came from very well-meaning citizens who drafted this. So I don't think criticizing their drafting is really constructive here. I understand your point, but this article is what it is.
Well, I agree and disagree, Mike. I heard that they were counseled by town council on the wording of it, so I don't completely agree with that statement. This is very definitely a citizen's petition, but I think that we could cause the people that submit the petitions to have it be the appropriate length, the appropriate level of detail.
I think citizens' petitions can be whatever citizen.
Understood.
If a citizen gets enough
Understood.
signatures, they can propose anything. So, not that I'm encouraging anybody to do that. So, do we have any other discussion up here? If not, I'll call. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Reiterate, I don't see this as a referendum on the current committee. There was a period, not with this committee that I know of, but before that, where meeting after meeting had to be canceled because of travel. There could also be problems with someone has to recuse themselves or whatever. So I actually think it's kind of compelling to, we're also looking at the future, trying to learn from the past, not have a referendum on the present composition of the board. Thanks.
All right.
I guess my only comment would be just like when they were, the town was talking about expanding the size of the Board of Selectmen. I thought just for greater representation of board members by the voters, it was a good thing. And I think it fosters the trust of the public to have different members, different views, larger boards, until it becomes unwieldy. So I think in general, although I'm concerned about the political motive discussions, always concerned about those things, I don't see how it would be a bad idea to expand. Thank you.
All right. Do we? I guess any more discussion? Then we'll vote. All those in favor of supporting Article 3?
We need a motion.
Yeah.
I made a motion.
I'm supposed to be keeping track of this. Sorry about that.
Yes, we had a motion. That was the discussion of the motion. Sorry. So all those in favor of supporting Article 3? Oops, so it's 8-0. Thank you. Now Article 4. Establishing qualifications to serve on the Sherborn Board of Health. It is in the best interest of the town of Sherborn, the members of the health board, to be experienced, credentialed health professionals or environmental scientists, so that they are equipped to interpret scientific data and analysis and can fulfill the charges of every health board pursuant to Mass General laws, which is to make decisions which will be in the interest of the public health for the benefit of Sherborn residents, Sherborn's natural resources, and the community as a whole. Massachusetts Boards of Health are responsible under the Massachusetts general laws, both state and local regulations, for disease prevention and control, health and environmental protection, and for promoting a healthy community. These are statutory and service responsibilities. Therefore, as citizens of Sherborn, we propose that the town of Sherborn establish minimum credentials for serving members of Sherborn's Board of Health to effectively execute this mandate to promote public health. George, do you have a presentation?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so we'll be limited to 5 minutes, and when Susan will let you know when that time is up.
Okay.
Should we turn that off?
Yeah, turn that one off. So thanks, David.
We've advanced this article because we wish to advance or enhance the ability of the Board of Public Health here to focus going forward on its core mission, which is the preservation and oversight of public health issues in this town. We know that the state, and via DEP in particular, that Sherborn must address environmental health circumstances that are unusual for the great majority of towns in Massachusetts. We know that the state is on record as encouraging for all towns in the state the credentials that we here propose for persons serving on the Sherborn Board of Health, premised on the understanding that towns will benefit most from the experience of board members credentialed in fields of science and law that are directly relevant to the creation, oversight, implementation, and enforcement of standards particular to environmental conditions prevailing in a given town. We know that the state mandates that local boards of health establish such health and environmental standards above those established by the state itself to ensure protection of the environment and public health as each individual town deems necessary for itself. We know that the health and environmental standards that Sherborn now has in place address both the law and the science supporting our environmental health standards. It is therefore proposed here in the form of Article 4 that credentials on the order of those now held by the present Board of Health be required for all future members to serve on the Sherborn Board of Health. To protect Sherborn's unusual environmental conditions, we believe it is necessary that persons serving on the Board of Health not only appreciate why we have the standards that we do, but also to understand the law and science supporting these standards in order to fairly judge at any given time the validity of the law and science supporting these standards for the greater benefit of all the residents of Sherborn. The credentials that we propose here cover a broad range of practical experience generally found to some extent in most existing boards of health, and that are generally understood to be appropriate for persons serving on a Board of Health, particularly as these forms of experience promote a common focus on the law and science supporting the standards in place, while discouraging conflicts of interest and agendas unrelated to the actual creation, oversight, implementation, and enforcement of public health standards. I personally was responsible for gathering 53 of the 155 petition signatures over the Labor Day weekend that generated this article. I was genuinely surprised that so many who signed the petition, the large majority in fact, volunteered that they're surprised that for such a task-specific entity as the Board of Health and specific qualifications to serve on the Board of Health were not already in place. We believe that there is a broad support at Sherborn for a Board of Health so credentialed now and going forward to professionally and competently respond for the benefit of all residents of Sherborn to applications submitted by developers for high-density projects such as 40Bs in Sherborn that can potentially stress our environment in ways that have not been the case in the past. We describe in this article a process to be followed by the Board of Health in vetting candidates submitting credentials within those given, as well as for credentials not within those given, noting that Massachusetts law provides an appeal process should a candidate not agree with the conclusions of the vetting provided.
Thank you. Do we have public comment? Go. Rebecca? Okay, go ahead. You're welcome as anybody else. You have 2 minutes.
The breadth of responsibilities that the Board of Health takes care of is greater than most people are aware, and it's also standard practice in health fields and most scientific fields to be credentialed in those areas to demonstrate proficiency and technical expertise. We need to have that ability in dealing with pressures of development, pressures of other things. It's important for a balance of power that the Board of Health not have a horse in the game, that we can be objective and use our scientific knowledge to interpret things that would be in the best interest of public health without other influences clouding our decision making. For liability protection for the town, and this did come up more than once in the fields discussions for the Board of Health, we weren't sure who was going to carry the liability if somebody developed methemoglobinemia because the calculations for that particular project were that the nitrogen levels for the future residents, not even the abutting residents, was 7 times the threshold for potable water. That's very dangerous. And because there were private well systems, they would not require testing. So I think for liability protection, the ability to make informed decisions which are defensible in a court of law may also have some value. But most importantly, there are many different fields which would be included in the credentialing, and there has been a precedent set for this. Many states have credentials required for their boards of health. Our state, if it's an appointed board, requires credentialing, but an elected board obviously doesn't. So I think it would be in our best interest.
Right.
All the boards in town are devised of diverse groups. You all don't have the same profession. I think the Board of Selectmen is a great example of, the need where it's great to have some lawyers on the board.
Tonight it's not a great example, Ray.
And for there to be people that have that sort of background, but the board's job is to interpret and move the policy that's in place. And, it would be a disservice to the town not to have somebody on there that comes from a different opinion, look at why we do things differently than another town does things that might be beneficial, and not to get, mired into science that's been around a long time. I just feel like this is the, well, if you do that, we're going to pull this article, and the town gets to vote. People get to go out and say, I'm not going to run. Believe me, I don't need that. But people will run. The town gets to decide who they think is competent, and that's who gets to come on board.
Thank you. Frank?
Frank Hess, 64 South Main Street. I am against this article. I appreciate the need for skilled members, but presently voters have given us 2 MDs and an environmental professional. For this article, we'd have to draw up criteria, and who would do that, and then have a person or group to judge the credentials to allow someone on the ballot. You would have to have what a former president would call a decider. Let the voters be the deciders. Also, the board, like the fire chief in Article 2 and other boards, should be able to hire outside consultants for specialized information as they need it. I mean, the most important thing for any board member, any board to know, is to know enough to know when they don't know anything. And they should be able to go out and ask that. I mean, if we had an individual or group who could decide who could run for president, we might have no one on the ballot.
Susan Tyler, Western Avenue. I've heard that we have, here in Sherborn, we have unique conditions and unusual conditions that we have to deal with here. We are not unique. We are not the unusual town. There are 351 communities. We are not the only ones that have wells and septic systems. Now, then I've heard that the Board of Health needs credentials because they deal with the groundwater, the public health. We have other boards in town that also deal with the regulatory over properties. We've got Conservation Commission. They're dealing with the implementation of septic systems and wells and where they are. We don't require credentials of them. We don't say you have to do this, you have to do that before we can even consider putting you on there. You also have the planning board, you've got the ZBA. More importantly, we've got an election coming up here in November. And the only qualifications that person needed to be was a citizen and 35. And we're going to ask here in Sherborn that we require all sorts of qualifications to run for the Board of Health. Oh, don't forget to vote in November.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Lisa Camp, 291 Western Ave. I did some research across the state and found that most of the boards of health across the state do have 3 members. There are a decent proportion that have 5. It's not unprecedented. But when I looked at the types of people who are on it, they reflected, I think, the qualifications that Rebecca said. They were LSPs like myself. They were environmental scientists, environmental attorneys, physicians. And I think that what is being articulated is simply what most towns have had the good sense to do, which is if the mission statement is to protect the people, the public health, and the water that people are consuming in this town, which, although it's not unique, it certainly is unusual in Massachusetts. We're one of very few towns, especially in the eastern portion of the state, that relies virtually exclusively on private wells and private septic. That is a fact. That's not an opinion. And I think the biggest thing that personally I am, I guess, wondering and concerned about is that what we need to be careful of is that people who run for the board and who could be elected, it's a democratic system, I applaud that, do not have any financial interest in developments in the town or real estate acts that could benefit or be hurt by legislation that's supposed to be focused on protecting public health. So I think that really, to me, is the central issue, whether you're a chemistry major or a biology major or someone who's just very good with data and facts. I think that's all good, but I think we have to just be very careful that it's not just recusing yourself from a particular project. It's, oh, I might be working on a new project, so this would be very advantageous to me purchasing this property and developing it. So I think we just all need to be very mindful of that and careful about who we elect and consider going forward.
I'm Colleen Hatfield, Russet Hill. I'm speaking in opposition to the proposed warrant article to establish qualifications to serve on the Sherborn Board of Health. Let me begin by stating what I think we all believe. We want a Board of Health that includes members that are knowledgeable, experienced, and that will act in the best interests of our town. The question is not whether candidates for the Board of Health should be qualified to serve, but rather who should make that determination. Historically, Sherborn has allowed the community to make that decision, and we have all been well served as a result. This proposal suggests that as a community, we are no longer able to determine the appropriate qualifications for the board, which is a position I do not agree with. This petition cites the legal obligations for the Board of Health, specifically that under Massachusetts laws, Board of Health are responsible for both state and local regulations for disease prevention and control, health and environmental protection, and for promoting a healthy community. Like virtually all laws, though, it doesn't prescribe exactly how boards of health should affect this mandate, nor does it state who is qualified to do so. It leaves that decision to the individuals in each community. And reasonable minds can disagree regarding who is best equipped to serve on a Board of Health. For instance, depending upon the circumstances, I believe that an effective Board of Health requires individuals with a diverse set of backgrounds, be it experience in public health, medicine, environmental science, law, and perhaps even business. You may disagree with me on these qualifications, which is okay. What is not okay is that this petition allows others to determine those qualifications to the citizens of Sherborn. I also note that this petition raises a number of questions. Why is it being proposed now? Who is deciding which candidates are qualified and on what basis? How are we preventing conflicts of interest? I think that over time the petition, if it becomes effective, creates more issues than it proposes to solve. We're a small town with a passionate group of residents interested in helping Sherborn. There is another petition to expand the Board of Health to 5 members, which we discussed tonight. That petition seeks to expand the community participation in our governments. The current petition is diametrically opposed to that concept. We can reasonably disagree regarding the evolving needs of this town and what those needs require from the Board of Health. However, at the very least, I think we should all be able to consider any candidate that is willing to run for the Board of Health. This petition doesn't allow the citizens of Sherborn to do so, and I encourage individuals in town to vote.
Adam Page, 3 Peckham Hill. I think people should feel comfortable that the rules around conflict of interest would protect the town. So I don't think there should be so much fear that someone who is a developer or from any background be on the board. And then the other thing is, thank goodness we were able to elect Abraham Lincoln, who wasn't a surveyor like George Washington was.
Carrie Lombard, Cider Hill Lane. I respectfully disagree with the call to place exclusions on who can run for seats on the Sherborn Board of Health. There are countless reasons, really, why I disagree, but my opinion is that who can run for an elected town board should always be determined by the residents of this wonderful town. Are the Sherborn residents no longer to be trusted with this responsibility? Is there reason to think that our citizens are somehow incapable of making this decision? I recently watched a video on the Massachusetts Medical Society website. It featured an interview and article with two then members of the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards. This was from June of 2014. Here's an excerpt from this reference. Who are these people who sit on the boards of health? And the answer, they are local residents and come from all walks of life. There are no specific requirements or special skills that are needed, just a desire to contribute to a healthy community. I think we should all think about that.
Warren Wheelwright again. I don't think you'd see this article if it weren't for the increase from 3 to 5. And the obvious easy way, although I don't think it's obvious to a lot of people who don't go to caucus, to submit candidates from caucus where they rule out somebody who might not have quite the vote because he didn't have the representation. And caucus doesn't deal necessarily with the conflict of interest or the qualifications. You had no choice in the Board of Selectmen in the last time when you voted last spring. Now you could say, oh, it's great, we have 5, but you don't necessarily have the qualifications if you don't have a choice. And I think that's what everyone here is saying. We'd like to see that. If you can feed in one person at a time, that'll certainly take care of a choice to the electorate. But the problem is, in a few years, you're going to have 2 come up. And all you have to have is 2 builders, 2 real estate agents come together and pack caucus, and you have a takeover. And what was the move for the selectmen increase? There was a motion trying to move toward more development. What is really underlying this isn't the workload, it's trying to get looser regs. But when you're all facing an increase in costs down the line, and I look at a lot of gray hairs, I'm gray hairs, we may not be here when somebody who's bought into these units, whether it's 40B or not, isn't built properly. We're not going to pay for it, they will. Thank you. Do think about that.
Bob. Bob Delaney, Pleasant Street. It seems to me that all boards require new people to have a learning curve. Not require, it's just is. There's a learning curve. And I think in this town, the average education level is pretty high. And I don't think there's too many people in town who wouldn't be able to learn what and read what the regulations are and how to interpret them and how to enforce them. I think it's important that not only they be willing to learn, but that they understand the pros and cons of each argument. And I think this is just totally a waste of time, this article.
Peter Liffin, Doppingbrook Road. 2 quick points. The manner in which the Board of Health decides regulations is they have regulations and then they enforce them. They interpret them and they enforce them. That's their job. That's the manner in which they protect the public health and welfare of the town. They can't really just make it up as they go along without suffering potential for suit because they can't just, decide something on a whim. So the regulations, frankly, are what they're working with. They're working with the regulations, and if the regulations need some adjustment, that's their job. They should be doing that. But to another point, I'm going to go back to the fact that I served for over 20 years, and I served with some amazing variety of people. For 6 years, I served with a home builder, a guy that built houses in town. Nobody had a problem with that. And, he made thoughtful and considered decisions on behalf of the residents that came before the board. I served with an insurance salesman, made the same thoughtful, considerate decisions for the people that came before the board. When you choose to serve your town, it is a selfless choice. That's why you do it. and you do it for the good of the community. Thank you.
Sorry to come back again, but I couldn't resist. Be still my heart. I can't believe that I'm hearing these young people singing the song that I have sung over and over again. Let's let our community choose who they want to serve on these boards and not eliminate people by putting restrictions. And contrary to the scare tactics about caucus, if you don't win the nomination at caucus, you just have to collect signatures and get on the ballot. So there are choices. If people want to serve and they are not elected at caucus, there's another way. But I'm very against taking away the right of the people in the community to vote for the people who serve us in these functions, as long as we can and as long as there are people who are willing to do it.
Do you have any further public do you have another comment, or you already had your presentation? I don't.
Yeah, I think many of the commentators here are not aware of the rather broad range of disciplines that not only the state is in favor of having on boards of health, but we ourselves have included in our article as logical, reasonable disciplines to have on a board of health. These are hardly restrictive. Looking at the body of disciplines which you can choose from, if you are seriously interested in serving on the board of health, it's not hard to find one of these disciplines that in fact would be yours. The reason for the warrant article at this point now is really we are coming to a time when it's becoming increasingly important for people to be aware of the range of disciplines that actually do service public health. And we're putting the spotlight on the range of disciplines that in fact are encouraged by the state for people to serve on boards of health. This is a understanding or a perception that I think many people are not necessarily aware of, but it is important that people understand when they go to vote that these disciplines are in fact broad and approved by the state, encouraged by the state, and in fact for the special situations that we face here in this town, appropriate. Now, in our warrant article, we have provided for the eventuality that someone could come to the voting to an electable position without having one of these credentials that is specified to the letter. We're not trying to close the door on people coming to the Board of Health. We specifically have indicated in our article that the Board of Health is willing to consider the credentials of anyone, bring them to them, that may not dovetail precisely with what's on the Board of Health.
Do you have a comment?
Betsy Johnson, Western Avenue. The earlier speaker mentioned something about it being very easy to find a way to include someone under their categories that were acceptable. If so, why have them?
Hi, Michelle Murphy, Russet Hill Road. I wasn't really aware of this last article until I got here tonight. What I would like to say, I grew up in a small town very similar to Sherborn. My dad served on tons of committees in town. He was on finance committee, he was on the selectmen, he was in school committee. He was a small business owner. He didn't have any particular expertise other than that he was passionate and probably, willing to give up his time like many of the people in this room. So I really disagree with the spirit of this. I think it's, somebody mentioned collusion earlier. This feels like collusion in the other direction to me.
Any other comments? If not, I'll have Mike go ahead.
Right. So again, we did hear a presentation and a few comments before, but we did not take a vote. So I'll ask if there's a motion from this board to either support or oppose this provision. Anybody?
I move to oppose.
Okay, I'll second that. Can we have some discussion?
Well, under discussion now, I'm not sure this is ready for prime time in a couple of ways. There isn't a list in the article of what the what the criteria are. And I saw one set of criteria, and I looked it over, and I realized that even though I've done years of service on the state medical board regulating the medical profession, and I've been a municipal lawyer for a long time, and I've represented a lot of Board of Health, I would not be eligible to run for and be a candidate for the Board of Health. And so that gives me pause. But then I saw another version that said, you know, any lawyer could then be on it. And I'm not sure that any lawyer is as well qualified as other people. So I don't think the article is ready yet. And I would add to that it's in the form of a home rule petition, which means if passed, again, the legislature adjourned on July, the last day of July, which I think is the 31st, maybe the 30th. And to introduce a home rule petition at this point will go to January. It will go through the committee process. It wouldn't be enacted. It's not likely to be enacted. Anything's possible, but it's not likely to be enacted in time for this upcoming election. And so the board has voted, the advisory committee has voted to support an article that would add somebody in this upcoming election. If that passes, it's not likely the statute would be in place in time to affect that election. And for constitutional reasons, you can't make the statute retroactive. If somebody's on there and doesn't have these qualifications, you can't go up to them and say, hey, there's a statute here, you're out, you don't have these qualifications. So I think where I'm at is that from a sort of a legal technical point, that it needs work. You haven't presented what really the motion would be under this article, and I think you said at the beginning that it almost didn't matter what their motion was because they'd make it at town meeting. You had to make up your own motion or something.
Right. I mean, I think we would, again, like we talked on the last article, we would talk to town council about what the motion, when we have our motions meeting on the 17th, depending on whether we decide to support this or not. That's when we would decide. I mean, I guess we would get the spirit of the motion from the petitioner, like we said on the last article.
Right, well, I just don't feel that there's enough in front of me to say, yes, I support this, particularly where the thing that I did get, and again, I don't know where this particular thing came from. It's from
town council.
From town council, would make myself ineligible to be ever a member of the Board of Health. Not that I ever want to be.
Blessing, Paul. It's a blessing.
So, Chuck, do you have anything to comment? No, okay. And I would say I think there's something just fundamentally undemocratic about limiting the people who can run for a board in the town of Sherborn. I would also note where there is proposed motion language, which I understand was worked out with town council by Dr. Honeywell. The authority that would review the credentials is the Board of Health itself, so it becomes like a fraternity or sorority deciding who can join its own ranks, and I think that's also a weakness of the proposal. I'm very sympathetic to the idea that the Board of Health should have very well-trained or very capable people who can learn the regulations or who know the regulations, know the science, are capable of understanding it. I'm also very sympathetic with the idea that we should be funding the Board of Health sufficiently to have a skilled agent with enough hours to actually serve the community and be able to go out and get consulting help for things like 40B projects. And I think that's the way you make sure enough expertise is brought to bear. The board members themselves are really
the residents acting through their electoral process to make sure there's representation in the room, and they pick people who have good judgment as well as the skills or the experience or the ability to learn that they need to make these decisions. So I'm I guess, sympathetic with and aligned with what I think is the motivation behind this proposed article, but I don't favor this article. I'm against it, and I guess we could take a vote now.
We just have one thing.
Oh, you want to add something now?
No, I just want to add one thing. Mike, that was well said. I think fundamentally it's bad policy, and I think it would be comparable if the advisory committee selected the qualifications for advisory committee members. Town moderator does that. If the Board of Selectmen, this article, if we were establishing the qualifications to run for Board of Selectmen, and we were the ones who were deciding whether or not you met them, I just think it's fundamentally flawed. I think it's a bad policy and fundamentally undemocratic, so I'll echo what Mike just said.
Okay, so should we have a vote on this?
Well, just one more comment. Okay. What I've seen in the law is that if you have an appointing authority, the appointing authority can establish standards like this and enforces it. But an elected board, by definition, has no appointing authority to provide this. So essentially, that leaves it ultimately up to a court to decide interpreting the language. Yes, it would go initially to the Board of Health for discussion, but it would fall under the sort of the default appeal statute, which is the certiorari statute. So it would end up in court, and any candidate who felt I'm qualified and I was turned down would go find a judge. Is that the best process for the town? The idea to me it hasn't quite got to the point where the pieces have come together for me.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. We're ready to vote. So the motion is to oppose this article. All in favor of that?
At this time.
Okay.
As
Oppose this article
written.
as written. All in favor of that?
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to bring it up.
I should also mention Mark expressed his opposition to this as well when he was on the phone earlier.
Thank you. I'm going to bring it up here for questions and comments to advisory. Jeff?
I'll do a preface comment just because I have attended so many meetings. I think Mike said it more eloquently than I probably will, but I can understand and I'm sympathetic to the genesis of this. I'm not sure this is the proper vehicle, but having attended all the Fields of Sherborn meetings this past year, you really did need people on the Board of Health who understood the technical issues, and you can't just hire the experts, because in those meetings we had 2 experts that the town hired and 2 experts that the developer hired, and they didn't all agree. Even the 2 hired by the town didn't agree with each other on some issues. So you actually had to have the Board of Health reading between the lines and understanding how to take a piece from this person, a piece from that person. Now, smart people, someone brought up the point there's a lot of smart people in town, that's true, but there's no question in my mind that you need to have technical people on the Board of Health. I'm not sure this is the right way, but you definitely need people, particularly in this town, that understand environmental science, because other towns that have public water supplies don't have to, they have a public wells and they have a wastewater treatment plants, don't have to concern themselves with these issues. So we are a little bit unique, and that's where I disagree with Susan a little bit on that. We are a little bit unique in that regard. The second thing I want to point out is the 40B developments we're seeing. This has worked well in the past for sure, but the 40B developments have very complex, sophisticated new wastewater treatment systems and are using different combinations of wells and different combinations of pre-treatment systems. So it's not a simple private home with a simple septic system. So they're actually much more technologically complex than the past that we've encountered in town. So there definitely are reasons why I think we want to encourage people to run for the Board of Health that have the qualifications to be there. But I do think that the democratic process is the best way to do that. But we need to make sure that we, I think Marion said it well too, that we encourage people to run and that we respect the people that serve and appreciate all the technical competence that's required.
Just mirror some of the comments that were made up here. It does seem like technically, petition doesn't seem to be technically sound at this point in time. I would note that I agree with the goal of capable and competent board members. I don't know necessarily that I need to hear technically competent or capable members, right? But capable, willing members. And that to me is part of the election process and not necessarily part of a mandated petition in this case. And finally, almost as a subcategory of that, just a quick look and search, it shows that 0.29% of the population have medical degrees, which is right. That's not 2.9%. That's 0.29%, and that really that limits the number of people who could actually serve on the board in this case. So those are my takeaways from this discussion.
If I could, there's 42,000 doctors in Massachusetts that we've licensed.
And due to our socio-demographics here, we may have a higher percentage than most.
Much higher.
Go ahead, Mary.
Yes, I have a few things. One is my feeling is if you want to legislate qualifications for a position, you can do that by making the position appointed. Then you can say the person who fills these positions must have this qualification, that qualification, the other qualification. When the position is an elected position, that's what it is. The people get to choose who it is. And the route that we have taken in this town is to have these positions on the Board of Health be elected. If they are elected, then it's up to the people to choose. So that's one thing. A second thing, I was charmed by, I think it was Adam's comment about Abraham Lincoln. And I would note that in 1799, Paul Revere was appointed chairman of the Board of Health in Boston, the first local health board in the Commonwealth, and was given broad authority to control environmental contamination and deadly epidemics. He was, I believe, a silversmith. So, for whatever. I would also note that the individual who Kerry referred to from the Massachusetts Association of Hospital Boards, who said that people come from all walks of life, is in fact a current member of our Board of Health. And he further stated, people serve for a variety of reasons. They may get involved because they have a particular skill set or because of a particular issue they want to get involved with. This was an interview. If anyone wants to hear it, I have it here live. I'm willing to play it, but it's getting late and it's getting hot. But this is someone who is currently serving on the Board of Health, was president of the Mass Association of Hospital Boards, and health boards, and encouraged in this interview a variety of people to put themselves forward and serve their communities by participating in the Board of Health. And I would also note that the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards provides training for all, makes it available for all new people who become members of boards of health. I don't know if any of the current members of the Board of Health have gone through this training. Yes? Yeah. Okay. Okay. And there would be no reason to believe that future people being elected to the board, and I think that with the attitudes and so forth that the current members have, I think it would be good for them to encourage the new people, to whoever they are, to participate in this training. It's a week-long thing. I'm not going to read it. You can look it up. But if you want to enforce qualifications, make the positions appointed. If they are elected, you cannot enforce qualifications.
Any other comments, Barb? Susan?
I think we have to come back to, I think Mike probably said it best tonight, is it's a public role. And the public can run and be elected by the citizens of this community. And I think we have to stay founded on that. Let the democratic process make the decision for the right candidate. So, and not specific qualifications or specific academic achievements or professional roles. I think anybody who is willing to put in the time and the effort to run for the position should be able to.
Ben?
But one skill that wasn't mentioned is administration. And I haven't been to all the meetings, but it sure seems like, a quarter of the time in the past couple of years has been administrative issues. Who put in what time card and was it good and stuff like that. That's just seems like a tremendous waste of time.
Just really quick, I just want to take issue. I think any technical defects with this warrant article can be cured by the motion. I disagree that you cannot, even for an elected position, establish some minimal qualifications. Having said that, it is an elected position. I think the people of the town should decide who they want to elect. If they want to vote in the person that's got a doctorate or a legal degree or something, or someone that's just has no degrees but trained themselves by practical experience, they should have a right to do it, and it should remain an elected position without restrictions. But I know a few people that would be great for the Board of Health that don't have advanced degrees. If there are two people running, well, then that's a problem. Then there isn't a choice, and we have to get as many people running as possible. We've never had a problem with electing a qualified board thus far.
If anybody else, I was just going to add, I just want to say that I think Mary said it best. I think if you want to have minimum qualifications, it should be an appointed position. I think as an elected position, let the democratic process work. That's exactly how I feel about it as well. So I'm going to open it up to additional public comment, if there is any. If not, then I will close comments and request a motion from.
I would move no action.
I have a second.
Second.
Do we have any more discussion? If not, I'll have a vote for no action on Article 4. It's 8-0. And that concludes our public hearing. Thank you all for coming and participating.
Second.